one. All right. I think we are live. Yes, we are. Hey, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome to another GameDev live stream with your boy Barles and Jason. No, I'm just kidding. This is Charles and Jason. Today, you might notice a couple things. You might notice my setup is a little, I guess, how do we say it, lower quality than it usually is, or than I like to keep it.
Streamlined. We like the term streamlined. That's it sounds professional.
Yeah, this is a very streamlined setup here. I didn't have to set up my DSLR and tripod, and that's because they are no longer here in my apartment. Because as I've belabored for the past month or so, as you all know, I'm in the middle of a move. Actually, I'm not in the middle of a move. I'm at the end of a move. So, anyway, that's this will be the last stream in this apartment. So. Yeah, it'll hopefully look a lot cooler next time and a lot better in the next couple months. But anyway, that's that. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion. Jason and I had a pretty good conversation during the last stream. Actually, not just Jason and I. Everyone in the chat was there too, and we talked through freelancing and as a Unity developer and some things about that. So we're going to continue that discussion, but this time we're going to dive into the code. Jason, do you want to give like a synopsis of what we talked about last time?
Apparently our audio levels are a bit off, by the way, so maybe we should fix that before I scream at everybody.
All right, I'll raise you up. Are you too...
No, I'm apparently too loud. You're the quiet one.
Gotcha. I think I just raised you up, so that didn't work. All right, I will adjust that.
Yes, Jason is using a different mic than before because if we do jump to the code, I don't like having a big bloody mic hanging in my face because it blocks my screen. So I'm using this wireless mod mic, this one over here. So this is my temporary mic for this kind of stuff.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have a full assortment of microphones. I've got a lav, I've got a condenser, I've got the dynamic. It's just depends on the situation. Unfortunately, they all sound crap. That's the only. I can't make my audio sound good when you're got a terrible bit rate on your stream.
Yeah, right. It's like the bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think I've adjusted it. So let us know if that needs any more adjusting. But yeah, last stream we talked about. You want to give a summary or?
Yeah, I guess the general thing was we're talking about the hashtag life of a contractor. The idea being that we're what it's like to literally day to day do this kind of job. The kind of things you can expect to deal with. The sort of how you can be the person people want to call. And I think that's probably the most important takeaway is that it's not about who's the most technically proficient. And this is what we talked about before. This transcends this specific problem and is more just a job thing. If there's ever any job that you are applying for, it's not really going to go to the most technically skilled person. It's going to go to the person people want to work with the most. And they want to work with you for a number of reasons. And it's either going to come down to personality. Do you seem like someone who's engaged in the project? This kind of thing. So that's what we summarized last time. Yeah. And there was a couple of little tidbits in there, and we only got halfway through our notes list. So we're going to go through a few other little bits that I wrote down here, and then if time permits, I want to just do a really quick prototype example in Editor. And it's not like a real project thing, but it's going to be, I want to demonstrate something to do with sort of how you can go fast and also write clean code. But I'll get to that when we get to that. I don't want to get too early.
Yeah, before we do that, let's talk about some YouTube-y type things here. Be sure to smash that like button. And as we say in every stream, throughout this, we will be likely getting comments into the chat that we will not be able to get to. So what we always suggest is to just head over to the VOD. Once the stream is done, it'll be available on the channel. After a couple hours, it'll upload. And then just leave your question in a comment, and we always do our best to, if not respond in the next stream, we'll at least comment on your comment with our best answer. And of course, if you don't get something answered today, you can always bring it on over to the Discord server. If you look in the description, we have a Discord server for Infallible Code, a great community. I see a lot of members. There's Urizer, I see Stray. Happy birthday, by the way, Stray. I know I said it yesterday, but thanks for coming in. I see a couple other folks here. But we have a great community, so join us over there. Speaking of community, we have a milestone today to celebrate, and I asked Jason, and I actually asked you all to bring a drink, so I have a beer here. I'm going to crack that. And what we're celebrating, wow, that went everywhere. What we're celebrating today is the channel made it to 30,000 subscribers. So, usually you celebrate when you get to like 50 or 100K, but hey, at this level, any like 10K difference is a big deal. So, I want to thank you all for sticking around and, really making it possible for me to make these videos and to all this content. So, cheers, y'all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Here,
Speaking of
here, as they say.
here, yeah. Or prost, or as my wife has a really good like toast. It's like arriba, bravo, pa centro, da dentro. It's like a, I don't know, Spanish thing. I probably butchered that horribly. Anyway, speaking of thanking you guys, I want to also say thank you to all my patrons, but especially want to give a special shout out to my tier 3 patrons. Go through those now: Iron Alex, Yakub Al Safari, Usaf Ali Castle, Umat Sarin, Trond, Thomas, R Star, Nav from Academy of Games, Mighty Possum, Glasswell Entertainment, Dustin, Dark Rush Photography, Anson, who I see there. I think saw him in the chat. Amar Adurnovic, and Alwyn Kuravilla. You guys definitely go above and beyond to support this community. So thank you. And if you'd like to have a shout out in the next video or stream, you can head on over to Patreon, and there's a tier where I'll give you a shout out. So thank you guys. Alvin asks, my wife is Spanish. My wife and I are both Cuban, actually, but I just never learned Spanish. But yeah, but actually, she's full Cuban. Both her parents are Cuban, and my dad is Cuban, and my mom is not. So I just never got around to learning Spanish, unfortunately. But anyway, all right, yeah. So again, thank you all, and I think we can jump right into the topic. So where do you want to start in the show notes, Jason? Oops.
That is a good question. I think where we stopped. There's a line I put a note in regarding one of the questions was an engine I don't know. So if you see that line, that's probably where I'm going to jump from to continue with. So we somewhere in the middle.
And if anyone in the chat has questions, feel free to drop those there, and we can address them as well. But
yeah. On the plus side, everybody wondering about speed. I'm out of milk, so my coffee is hotter and darker than I'm used to. So I'm sipping it. So I've had less coffee, so I should hopefully talk less fast. Unfortunately, I can't be less Irish, so there's a limit to how slow I can speak. But at least it should be hopefully more understandable this time around.
That's funny.
Right. So just as a recap, we talked about the interviewing thing and the idea that you should be basically confident in your own ability. You should be transparent about what you do or do not know to a degree. Friendly and affable people want to work with you. And the last one I didn't touch on enough, but I just want to put a little dot there. One of the smartest things you can do for yourself when you're contracting or working with somebody is find out who you're working for. As in, people like to work with people who are interested in their project. So I make a point of, if I ever have literally any kind of meeting, if I'm meeting with vendors or clients or whatever, I'll find out who's on the meeting, and you do the 30-second LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. Like, you don't have to stalk them, but you can just say, what do they work on? What are their interests? What do they post about? Just give a quick, sometimes I'll even do this in the first opening minutes when people are introducing themselves at the start of a Zoom meeting. And that's just enough that you can then say, you can discuss things in framing references that people will like. And when people do the oh, hi, welcome to the meeting, whatever, it's like, oh, I notice you are into X, I've actually got this myself. And it really bridges that opening gap. So that's just one thing. Learn about what they're trying to do.
Social engineering, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And it's just like that. It isn't even like a hack or a secret thing. It's just fundamentally, if you find out if you like the person or what you like about them, you will enjoy working with them more, and they'll enjoy working with you more. It sounds like one of those, do your research and sneakily. No, just find out what you have in common that you can work together with. It's yeah, like I said, there's a quick scan of LinkedIn is not going to put you in stalker territory. It's just going to make you more inclined to understand what projects have they worked on, what do they know people that that you can talk about, that you kind of plan things together, that kind of idea.
Yeah. Rastail says, make sure you're actually working for them and not getting scammed.
Yeah,
Um,
there's that. That's that. Yeah.
it,
Thankfully, I've never had that myself, but I can. Yeah.
my wife isn't in development or game development, but she's in marketing, and there was a company that reached out to work with her, and we did our research because it just something seemed a little fishy about it, because like they had
Mm,
a decent looking website, but we just couldn't find any other information about that company. And then going down the rabbit hole, we learned that the domain was recently purchased, that the company was. It
mm,
basically turned out she ended up going to the interview anyway, but she could immediately see that it was a scam. It was just like
yeah.
so
Yeah.
obvious. So.
Well, I guess I'm lucky. I've gotten to the point I don't take spec jobs. So when I get stuff that's like randomly emailed to me or LinkedIn to me, it's like I'm not even going to really reply in most cases. But I'll only really work with people who are referred to me by somebody else. So I'll get a message saying, "Hey, I was talking to X," or I met you at this meeting or meetup or something. And so I have a luxury of that, and it comes from, like I said, work with people, have a good working profile, and people will want to work with you. So I don't really have that risk anymore. And I think that once you get past a certain threshold where you have clients, that shouldn't be a problem for most people.
For those who don't know, what is a spec job?
Um, Well, I basically just mean it as when someone sends you an off the cuff message, like you
Mhm.
don't know them, you didn't, you have no prior arrangement with them. They're not, it's not like a client you've worked for before. There's no working relationship. It's just like when you get one of those random emails, or in my case, I get quite a few on Unity Connect and stuff where people will
Oh,
be like,
nice.
"Hey, you have this skill set. Can you work for us?" And it's like, I don't know who you are. Nobody who I know knows you, and unless you're offering like a tantalizing offer, which very rarely happens, it's not something I'm going to even consider.
Do you think there's ever a situation like or a period in your career, I guess, as a freelancer that you would try to take those or at least vet them?
Well, it comes down to, again, I guess, public profile, and this is where that quick scan of people's stuff comes into play.
Mm,
If someone sends me a random message saying, "Hey, I like your stuff," or a common one is, "I saw this thing you worked on,
mhm.
and I want to reach out and see if you have time," and then I will see, do they have a Twitter profile where they're posting about projects, and those projects look like they're garnering some attention, or they're in something that or they're part of some community that I'm in. And like I said, normally if someone says, "I tried a VR experience and you were credited as a programmer
Mm,
on it, I'm interested," that's usually because they are in VR. Like
mhm.
that's usually the way that works. And so I will check, are they posting about VR? Have they worked on other projects? Have they gone to the same film festivals and stuff that I've worked on? And once I kind of, you know what I mean? Like I find
Yeah.
you can pretty quickly find out if somebody is at least like there's a very firm legitimacy where it's just like these people are mostly okay, and then beyond that there's sort of vagueness, and I usually won't even entertain vagueness. Either
Mm,
somebody is directly like knows me from a community or worked with something.
yeah.
Um, and it may sound elitist to say that, but I don't think it is. I think honestly, you get to a point where like I can get enough work from just direct people I know now that I don't really need to take that risk. And I just think that's pragmatic. And I understand people will have to at the start, but your goal, at least from my perspective, should be building your Rolodex. Probably an old reference, but you should be building your portfolio of existing people you want to work with. So it's not just about getting one job; it's about getting. And this is where the whole like professionalism comes in. The the
Yeah.
the better job you do, the more people like working with you, the more they will call you back again. And I can honestly say I think 3 clients in the last 6 years felt like that they're probably not going to come back to us
Mm.
because something went wrong or the project didn't go as planned or whatever else. But literally every other client we've ever worked with has come back to us for something else later, and I think that's as good of a that's the goal in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, you're doing a lot of I think a big goal is doing the relationship building, and that's where networking, participating in communities, which is something we touched on a lot last stream, so
Yeah.
I won't belabor it, but that's just kind of the idea, just to kind of take it that next step. How Jason says going into the LinkedIn, like you're not doing that to be a creeper, like and interestingly enough, how it ties into the previous stream, how we talked about like participating in communities authentically, you should be authentic. You should try to take an interest in the people that you work with, because
Mm.
in the end of the day, there is the whole idea there is that you're going to be someone that they think of. It's like advertising, like Coca-Cola doesn't need to make commercials anymore. Everyone knows about them, but they're constantly building the relationship with their customer base, and it's like
Hmm.
that's what you're doing. You're trying to build relationships, and keep everyone keep yourself top of mind on other
Mm.
people's minds. That's kind of the what you're going for there.
Yeah. And I guess it's not a very satisfying answer. But Mohammed asked me there, what did I do before that? Do I just accept anything? And no, I didn't. Realistically, we covered it a lot more in the previous video. So if you watch that, the previous stream about contracting, we discussed it. But effectively, what I did is I had a normal 9 to 5 job. I wasn't doing full-time contracting, except for people who literally worked in previous companies I worked for, like literally friends asking for work for either them or their friends. And so I was doing a tiny bit of that. But even if I wasn't, that was all enterprise. That wasn't like the kind of stuff I wanted to do. As far as contracting in gaming, Unity, VR stuff, I got into that, as I said last time, with the basic idea of I reached out to people. I just was on communities. I was helpful. I was engaging. I worked with people on stuff. I did my best to help out, and I waited till somebody reputable contacted me. So when I would eventually get to the stage where somebody, I would never offer myself to do work. I find that turns people off. Say, hey, I'm free for contract. No, you never said that. I just work with people. I help them out. I offer code. I work in communities, and eventually someone's going to say, you've been working for free, helping me out on stuff. I've got a bigger project. I know I can rely on you from the stuff you've given me already. Here's a contract, and then that snowballs. So I don't even actually look. I don't think I've ever full on gone on a genuine hunt for contract work. Almost every single job I've ever taken has come to me in one form or another. But again, like I said, that's not like I sat and waited. It's the whole, as Charles mentioned before, luck favors the prepared. It's like I made myself someone who was desirable to hire. And then I waited till someone hired me. And it sounds like it's subtle difference, but like really, that's a huge, big difference than actively like trying to sell yourself. Selling yourself is like a car salesman. But if you instead look like an attractive person to hire and you are friendly and work with people, you don't actually ever really need to sell yourself because you're doing it by proxy of just being valuable, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And like, what's the saying? Dress for the job you want to work, or whatever. It's like if you just go and participate and work with people, then you will be. And you have to flip it too, like, and you have to look at someone else's perspective or the other side's perspective. You have someone who works for a company, and maybe they have a team of developers, but they need someone that they can rely on to help. I mean, and maybe I'm off base with this, but I feel like when a company looks for contractors, they're typically trying to fill a need that they can't fill in internally. So they're not going to want to have to they're not going to want to have to risk it on someone who's not going to help them and make their situation worse. They're going to want to be able to say like, "Oh, Jason, yeah, that guy does a lot of good work on this community here. Like we really could use some help. Let's reach out to him." And if there's already a relationship there, or maybe Jason already has a relationship with this person and can already commiserate with what they're going through in their team, then it seems like a perfect fit at that point, like an obvious thing. So that's, again, it's like you kind of social engineer it and you look at the other side, you can kind of see how these things happen.
And to answer the question of how do you know your portfolio is good enough, well, the truth is you don't get to judge that. It's people who want to hire you get to judge that.
Right.
And so the way I tend to go about that myself is I just put my best foot forward. Whenever I write some code I'm proud of, I will post it on some Discord and say, hey, look at the cool thing I made, because it isn't just genuinely showing off. It's kind of saying, hey, look, I know what I'm doing. And what I find very interesting is in most cases, when people hire you for your first few jobs, they tend to hire you for code they have literally seen you write. And what I mean by that is somebody will be like doing a spawning system and they will have seen you post a spawning system. So there's a very quick correlation of, oh, I know this person can 100% do the thing I want to hire them for. And you'll actually see this as a common thing in art hiring, especially. If you're hiring a concept artist, anybody who's been doing it long enough kind of knows you don't hire somebody for a style that they haven't demonstrated. And this isn't sort of, it may sound like it's disrespectful or you're pigeonholing someone, but the fact of the matter is it works for both people. Because if you're a concept artist or you're a modeler or a texter, you don't want to be given a spec for a job that like you don't know how to do, or you don't know if you're good at it. And realistically, because unless you've got like an actual mood board or something of example images, you're going to end up with this weird scenario where they're trying to like guess your intentions. But if the alternative is true and they've come to you and said, I like what you did on A, B, and C, I want one of those, but like a dragon, they're like, there is no ambiguity. You know their style, you know they like it. There might be some back and forths in the design choices, but like they already know what you're doing and they like it. And that's like peace of mind for someone who's doing contracting. And the same goes for you. So the question becomes, if you you can either hope your stuff's good enough, or you can kind of panic and possibly get jobs you don't know if you can do, or you can just keep posting stuff that you're good at or help other people out. That's the other one, like I said. Like if you see somebody has a bad input system, say, hey, I can help your input system. So you do that. Or if someone's got like a low performing thing on some shader thing, you can say, hey, let me, I have an idea that might help you. And when it comes time for them to do more shader stuff, they're like, I already know this person can do that. They've proven it. So when I'm hiring somebody for this exact problem, they have the exact solution. Yeah. So so the answer is no. You don't know when your portfolio is ready, because you don't get to pick. It comes down to when people decide to hire you. And two, if you're going to, you want to put enough work out there that people see that they know you can do a wider range of things, and then you're most likely going to hit something that is a common problem somebody has that they'll want to hire you for. So.
Yeah. Then you just continue to build the relationship, and that's really the important part.
And honestly, after like 3 or 4 jobs, you should get to the point where you have regular customers, because it depends on what you're doing. But contracting by design is not really a one and done kind of thing. The kinds of people who come to you for work, it's one of two things most of the time. It's either build this prototype for us, or this quick demo project for a showroom or something, or write this system. And if it's write this system, there's always more systems. If they like the first one you did, they'll want more. And if it's a showroom demo thing, the kind of client who builds showrooms and demos, they are going to do more showrooms and demos. Like the kinds of people who do those kinds of things go to a lot of things. And so they'll hire you multiple times.
Yeah.
So in both cases, like, it's not about getting lots of clients. It's just about getting 3 or 4 that are consistent enough that you can feel comfortable to grow what you're doing. And then you have a bit of breathing room, and it's not as scary anymore to, spend more time in communities. And that sort of by proxy grows more of your stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of like a loop that kind of feeds back on itself, because then you just become more and more involved. Unless you're like me and you work a day job and then you have no time to participate in communities. That's pretty rough.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been my experience. And again, as pointed out in the chat, someone else says the same thing. Shadman said the same thing. It's like how the friend found them work. And this isn't a random opinion I have. This is a lot of experience I have. Like I've been given contract work from people who've been given contract work by friends and so on. And it's this infinite cycle of, there are people I haven't worked with in like 6 years who will fire me off a random email and go, hey, I have a thing. Do you want to work on it? Because at least they worked with me one time and they remember I'm good at that particular thing. And so, and it's that's the thing too. People forget that they're also doing this subconsciously. You might not be thinking about it, but you do have a backlog of people that are good at stuff. You might have a friend who's a great painter, or a friend of yours who's good at music, and you don't have a project in mind. But if you ever did have a project that was involving something, you're like, oh, my mate does this particular thing. And it's not like you're actively building your portfolio of friends for this purpose, but you do that subconsciously. And so all your goal is to be that sort of subconsciously back of someone's mind whenever they think of, I'm stuck on this problem, or I need someone to do this. And it's like, I know already that this person can do this thing.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
So I think we've discussed fair enough how to potentially land jobs and keep jobs. I think this takes us to probably the second most popular question when it comes to contracting and freelancing is, what rate do I charge, or how do I come up with my pricing? I know that's something that I've always struggled with. All right.
That is really tough. Yeah. And I will admit, I'm not very good at this. I'm trying to be, but it's not one of those things I have a perfect answer for. But I will say I used to be very shy about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to sort of hum and haw and like try to go, let's figure it out, and try to put it off as much as possible, or quite frankly, accept whatever it is that they would offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to end up doing this for a while anyway, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's about having some people that want to work with you. And so I probably undercharged quite a bit in the early days. And it's not until I'd say the last 2 years that I'm pretty confident giving pretty high rates. my rates are pretty high. But that comes from experience, and it comes from confidence that I can add value. And I think if there's any, but before I get into the specifics of how maybe you should think about pricing, I would say from a philosophy of what you're doing perspective, there's 2 ways to look at what you do when it comes to working for somebody. You can see yourself as what your price is. In other words, how much is my physical moving my fingers on a keyboard worth to somebody? Or you can consider yourself by value. So it's either price or value. Price is where you're basically saying pretty much anybody with a similar skill set can do this. Therefore, I'm priced equal to what other people in a similar position can do. If you instead think of yourself as what value can I add to the client, you can start putting it under what are the client trying to do? Why did they come to you for the project? What will this give them? Why are they even doing this project in the first place? Is it going to result in more revenue for them? Is it going to result in more marketing for them? And once you find out what the point of the project is, the question becomes, what value can you bring to that project? So if the project is hypothetically a project worth 200,000, suddenly you're charging 10,000 is actually not that much in the grand scheme if you're going to literally make the entire thing and it's going to result in 200,000 in revenue or something. Obviously, it's not usually that clean and clear, but the point is simply a company is usually making a prototype or a demo or doing some system for something. They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because they're trying to build more revenue, or they're trying to sell an idea, or they're trying to prototype a project. And if you're willing to accept the fact that they are trying to do something that will result in a lot of money for them, because otherwise, why is it a business? It's much easier to sort of reason about to yourself that you are literally adding value in the form of manifesting an idea that they can't do without you. And that makes it sort of easier to reason about your own prices.
I actually have a quote that I saved from you from I think it was
Oh, no.
like a year ago. I saved the screenshot. Someone was asking on the Discord server, guys, documenting hourly rate is different than programming hourly rate. He was asking because they were trying, I guess like he was doing some work and they were trying to charge him an hourly rate for documenting differently from what his programming rate was. So then Jason says, I have a single hourly rate, work rate. Programming is a job that has a number of parts from debugging, documentation, coding, etc., some with more perceived value than other. But to be honest, it doesn't work like that. People are not paying you for an hourly rate, or people are not paying you an hourly rate for labor. They're paying you a rate for your experience at doing the job in total. And the assumption is that your experience means you will, as a whole, do it better than someone less experienced. In short, if you record them, the average programmer spends something like 65% of their time looking at their screen, not typing. But not typing is not the same as not working. You charge a rate to get a job done, and it is assumed you have the experience to use that time effectively. That being said, depending on how well you know the client or how much you have worked with them, I tend to let a few things like refactoring bleed over the edges of the quoted time. And it goes on, but I think that's the meat and potatoes of it is it's your experience. You know, it's the fact that you're someone who will get the job done. Does that sound fair? Does past Jason sound like?
Yeah, I'm worried when someone says, "Here's something you said last year."
Right?
Totally. It's like, I hope I still agree with it.
I took a screenshot of it for a reason because I was like, "Damn, this is great."
Well, yeah, like so, I will say probably I'm less focused on hourly rate these days. I'm trying to focus more. I'm trying to avoid letting a client consider you as an hourly rated person. Unfortunately, that still happens. I want to be more considered as you want this project to succeed, and I can help this project succeed, and my value should be commensurate with how much the project will succeed or fail relative to my value added to it. So I try to be less pivoted specifically on hours these days, but fundamentally, yeah, the point is still the same: is that I don't think it's valuable to tell people it's like I am this hourly rate, because at the end of the day, the other thing too, I've gotten job offers from people that are fundamentally different than what I normally do. I've gotten offers where it's like, hey, we want you to build this system, we want you to write this code or document or do this thing or present this concept, or there's all sorts of different things. And like honestly, it's a personal decision how much I want to do a particular thing. Like I might say, honestly, I'll happily do this for that price, but I won't do that unless you pay 3 times the amount. Because quite frankly, I hate doing it. I can do it, but realistically, I don't want to do that thing. And so I don't like putting a specific like my existence working on your stuff is worth this much per hour. I think that's unfair both to you and to them, because you'll have different levels of quality and value you bring depending on what they want you doing. And so I've actually said to clients, and this kind of surprises people, they said, "Oh, can you do this project?" And I'll say, "You don't want me doing that. I mean, I will, but like, you don't want me to, because you can get cheaper people to do pretty much the same thing. But what I can do is I can add value that you may not know you need. So let me explain your project as I understand it, and let's talk about things that I think you might be missing or that you might not have people doing. And then I'll go in and I'll say, here's some architecture concerns you have. Here's some stuff you may need to do. Here's various different things. And then it's a case of, if you need that job, hire me for that at my rates. If you want someone to type and do code stuff, I can do that too. But you're paying premium for that privilege. And so what I end up finding happens for me is I'll demonstrate that I'm adding value beyond typing on a screen, I'll get hired for that, not for the typing portion. Be hired as like a what value can you bring, and then because they like working with me, they'll tend to say, you know what, just do the typing bit too, and I end up getting paid more than I would charge for that kind of thing, if you know what I mean, because I'm a more expensive version of the same contractor that someone can get for cheaper
Right.
because they want to work with me, and it's easier that they have one person doing both things rather than hiring someone else. But I'm very blunt about that. Is my point. I'm very blunt to say there are other people who are cheaper for this kind of thing, if that's what you're trying to do, because I think it's, you don't want to lowest common denominator yourself. Like, you want to figure out what makes you happy. What is the, I think this is the big misunderstanding. If you take a rate that you don't like, you'll begrudge the client, you'll hate working, you'll be annoyed and feel like your time is wasted, and everybody's unhappy. Like, and that's like, you don't want that. Like, you're going to produce bad work for them, you're going to hate your day job. And so the truth is, as much as you may hate the idea, you sometimes just might have to turn down work if you can't make the numbers match. But that being said, I've been offered jobs where it's like, this is far lower than my normal rate, but you know what? It seemed like a fun project. So I'm
Mm.
actually okay to subsidize the project by the fact that I won't dislike it. And I'll say to the client, I'll say, you know what, I normally charge more, and I'll kind of work something out. And it comes down to um, like building a working relationship. And I'm more than happy to meet people halfway, but I won't do it if I feel like I'm undercutting myself to the point that I'll be unhappy.
Right. Yeah.
That's basically the point, right?
You're already going to be unhappy half the time when you can't find a job. So you might as well be happy when you're working a job. Matt Mirafish. Hey, man. How's it going? Matt Shell's in the chat. Good to see you. He recommends this book, The Business of Expertise. Never heard of it, but
Mm,
I'll definitely check it out because,
I'll add it to my list.
yeah. I'm
Uh,
curious. I'm always curious about any sort of help I can get on this topic because it just seems like one that no one has the answer for. And maybe there is no
mm,
answer for it. Um, Now, if you don't charge hourly, do you? Because there's another question to follow up on this, and I think you mentioned it in the notes here. It's like, so you take a job, and let's say you have an hourly rate, or you do a flat upfront rate, or maybe you
mm.
negotiate as you go in milestones. How do you handle it when you need to get assets and things like that to help you complete your work? Like I know you mentioned in the notes that, like, what if they're asking you to do something that requires art assets that you don't have, for instance, or
Yeah.
some
So
tools.
this is the thing too, is it really depends. I'll pull back one step first before I answer that, because it'll help answer that.
Hmm.
Is So back to the question of value.
Hmm.
The thing that is very interesting is, if you price yourself hourly, or by a certain amount, you'll end up having this weird scenario where you'll be too expensive for some small clients and you'll be dirt cheap to other bigger clients. And that's a weird place to be in, because I can honestly tell you, I've lost work because we quoted too low. Because what happens is, they went, nobody should charge that little for this project. They must be inexperienced. Like, honestly, like, we found out later they've gone with people 3 times the price. In fact, we've had people who passed on us because we were too cheap, went to somebody else. The other people made a mess of it, and they came back to us afterwards, and then we finished it, and they still work with us now, because it doesn't, because the expectation is, it's that sort of feeling of value. And so I guess the cycle it back. You again, you want to add value relative to the project. So if it's a big company and they're going to get a lot out of it, to them, less than 2% of the cost of the whole project is nothing for, like, making the entire thing. But if it's a small company, or somebody who just wants you to do some small bits of work, it comes down to, again, with the whole adding value thing, is that if you're too expensive, you're not adding value anymore. You're now like a chain around their neck. So it works both ways. And so once you kind of know what the person is doing, you can kind of say, look, I'm more than happy to say I am more expensive, but I'll come down to match you, than I am saying I'll work to match whatever you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But now, to cycle back to externalities. So
Mhm.
this is one thing of just being hired to do a job. And this is, I think, a big difference. Like I said, there's two sort of big categories. There's, you're either hired to do a particular thing. We need this system in our code, so make this system. And in that case, you normally don't have asset requirements. And even if you do, I recommend trying not to. For example,
Mm.
in my own projects, I'll use the hell out of Dutween. Dutween is amazing. I love Dutween. I won't use it in client projects unless I really think it's going to save me a lot of time. Like if I'm doing UI stuff that fades up and down, I'll just write a coroutine. I mean, it's probably slightly more efficient if I did a cached tweening thing, and it would probably add to some fancier animations otherwise. But I will first of all write it, and we'll get to like designing code so it can scale and you can modularly change it. I will write the first draft of the version I actually send them using almost all my own code. I try my best not to bring stuff in. And the same goes for if you're building a Unity project and you give it to a client, don't use something like Odin, because to them that's silly. It's like you hand them a project, if you give them the code and they're like, oh, by the way, you have to buy Odin and queue hierarchy and whatever. And it's like, why? Like all of that stuff doesn't help their project in any way. If you can get by without it, then try to, or at least export the project out in a way that doesn't need it.
Right.
If you do need work done, so for example, and this is the other thing too, is if a client comes to you for a project and it's got things in it that you don't know how to do. So they want you to say, I want a rhythm game with, custom music and all this stuff. And you're like, well, I'm not a music guy. You'll have to source that yourself. Mm-hmm. They might say, no, we want you to do the project. Don't say no, just like do a bit of research, find out who the other people are, and just roll in the fact that you might have to hire someone to do that job. And so sometimes we've done that where we've said, you know what, let's take into account that they want custom models. So we'll have to hire somebody for that. How much would I charge someone to do that? Or how much would they charge me? And find out the rates, and then bake in the cost of that plus maybe 30, 40% on top of it to cover all of the extra work you'd have to do to find them, and also any things that come up with their work, because it's the same thing. You're basically subcontracting at that stage. Yeah. So you may think like, oh, maybe the client won't like you subcontracting. They don't care. They want a project done. And if you tell them, we're doing this thing, I'll do this. We might, and again, I love this phrase, we might need to find someone for X. That's a great way of saying, I don't have that skill. I'm on board for finding somebody. I know some people that might help. Are you okay with that?
Which
and if
goes
they come back
more
and
into
say,
your expertise, you as someone who they're hiring as an expert or someone who knows, they're also bringing the fact that you know people who can fill that gap as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is, again, it's all part of the same thing. It's building a network, right? Like there are people here, like Don commented there in the chat earlier about his rates. Like if I ever needed some really good modeling done, I know a guy. Like it's just like, it's good to know. Like I haven't worked with him yet officially, but like I know from the stuff I've seen, he's really good. And so if I ever needed that, I can at least like throw that to a client and say, this is someone I know that does good work. Yeah. They might be too expensive for you. I don't know. I haven't done their rates. That's either you do that yourself and work with them, or I'll talk to them and we'll figure something out. Either way, the point is I have a network of people for that,
Yeah.
But that's slightly off topic. I guess the point is, what do you do if there are actual assets and stuff? Well, one, keep in mind they're going to own it. So whatever assets get made or done, like don't think you can just get a model made, give it to them, and then use it for other stuff. Does not work like that. Yeah. Code is one thing. You might be able to get away with it depending on what you're doing. But as a general rule, I either say, here's code I write that's like my library, and then I sort of gift my library to myself to work for free in the project, but it's my code. And then there's the code for their project. But anything that's their project code is theirs. I'm not touching it. I'm not using it for anything else. It's only the stuff that's like I've taken out and put in the library somewhere. I try to define that earlier so I can very clearly say this is the two. And if assets need to get made or need to buy assets, you just do it. You just like, if you look at a project and think it might be easier to buy this third-party asset for this thing, just include it in your rates. Just say, I'm going to do this, and make sure that you give them knowledge about the licensing. And I think it's to come back to what we said before. It's just generally like they want to see a project done. Nobody really cares how the sausage is made, right? That's the thing. At the end of the day, they're not going to begrudge you that you decided this particular element you're going to use like a highlighting shader off the asset store rather than write your own from scratch. Nobody cares, providing you either cover it in terms of you buy it yourself, add it to the project, and then distribute the project, and it's not included in the source code. Fine. Or if they want the source code, you're upfront about it and said you need to buy these 4 licenses legally. Fine. Either way, people don't particularly care. It's not going to be a deal breaker in most cases.
Yeah, Tech Dave makes an interesting comparison. So like we're like general contractors. They ask us to do something, and it's like, oh, I can work on your house for you. I know some plumbers. I know some electricians. I can do a lot of the work, but sometimes I might need to have someone else come in from my network to do a little bit of electrical work or something like that. It's the same with
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that's again where I would think is the more powerful position to be in.
Yeah,
you could just be you could be the person people hire to do code, or you could be the person they hire to complete projects. And that's a much better position because then you have a lot more control over what you're doing. And to be fair, I say this from the space of I'm not really that guy. I'm more of just the code architecture guy, but the person I work with is more of the project thing, and I'm kind of under that arm. I'm a subcontractor to them. That's
Mm.
not to say I haven't taken on my own jobs that are me doing a project by myself, but I tend to be more that second person than the first. But it's the place you want to be in. It's
Yeah.
you want to be known to complete projects, and if you have to like take on more responsibility, then so be it. And this is again comes back to rates. That's also what people are paying for. They're not just paying for you to sit and type. They're paying you're taking on the responsibility of finding people, figuring it out, rallying people together, doing the project management. And that's where the risk reward comes in. So that's why contractors cost more in general.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is like it's funny. We're like 3 lines in. There's so much to talk about. I haven't even gotten to like any of the stuff we're finding of hitting.
Yeah. I'm wondering where how far we should go into this before we look at some more code, look at some of the code that you prepared, or if we just keep diving into these topics.
Well, to be honest, I'd rather like there's yeah we'll increase the pace of it. We'll go through some more of these.
Fair enough.
Okay, yeah. So back to rates and estimates and stuff. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
the cliche is true. And I said this briefly in the last one, but it's the same as true here. And think about it for yourself, not just as a client. I know myself. I would prefer somebody tell me something is going to take a month, but it guaranteed it'll be delivered by a month, maybe even under, than someone tell me a week and it actually ends up taking 2.5 weeks.
Right.
Because I'll make expectations and plans and I'll have stuff to go to. And oftentimes with most clients, they come to you because they're going to a trade show or they're delivering to a client. And there's this like horrible chain of you promise it to them, so they promise it to their boss, who tells somebody, who books something, who hires somebody for this project because they know the deadline.
Terrible chain is like a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because somebody somewhere will freak out when stuff goes wrong. And so some people are like, oh, but you're lying if you're saying that it takes twice as long or something. It's like, I would rather say it takes a month. And then someone says, it shouldn't take a month. I've worked with people before and they've done it in a week. And I said, well, how about this? I can promise you it'll take a month or less. And that's a better place to be in than to promise something that has you scrambling. Yeah. And I've seen this too, is that if you underpromise for time or you try to be accurate with time, even if you do get it done right, you'll find yourself eating a lot of those costs. So for example, we've worked on projects before where the deadline comes up and we didn't bake it into the contract, or there wasn't any thing for overtime or anything. So we're kind of going, I guess we're just eating that. So we ended up having to spend like a week of late nights and working hard. And this comes back to that thing of now you begrudge the client. And I've had these situations where you end up a project hating the project and the clients by proxy, not because they did anything wrong, but because the deadline changed and you knew you couldn't really bring it up because it wasn't really part of the project. And so you just have to silently stew and get angry that stuff isn't working properly. And so I don't want to like pass that on one way or another. I would rather have more buffer than not. So I can't tell you the exact right amount, but basically guess how long it would take you to do something or how much something should cost you in terms of whatever price you're willing to charge. And if there are unknowns, assume the unknown is the worst case scenario and then add 20% to it. That's just the general rule. And like I said, like you don't have to, if you go under, then just don't charge for the last few days. Like you can always undo whatever that is, right? But you can't do the reverse. You can't just sort of say, I will do it for this price at this exact time zone. And if it goes over, like unless it's agreed for in advance, and nobody wants to be told, oh, it took an extra week, so you owe me an extra 3,000 or 2,000. It's like, no, I'd rather them say it was done a week earlier. Here's 500 back. Like it's just a better position to be in,
Yeah.
And as a small side note, because one of the questions here was, how do you enjoy freelancing compared to building your own game? I much prefer freelancing, actually, because I get to work on really interesting, weird projects. I've worked on stuff in the last 2 weeks that I didn't think of doing before. And what's really fun is that it's like I get to learn new stuff, add it to the portfolio, work on things that I would never do for myself. And there's also just the general, I don't know, there's a sense of pride in working on stuff in these small bursts. And I just find I get more done. If it's for yourself, you can keep fobbing yourself off and saying, oh, well, it's not important. It's only my project. But clients need it done, so you do it for the client. So I get more done if I'm doing contract work. And on a more holistic thing, it's it's something that's brought me some contention before by saying, but it's just harder to make money as a game dev these days. Like, you
Yeah.
have to hit successfully, and realistically, I know it's not very sexy to say, but like, if I work on a system for a client, I can make between 3 and 30,000 for something, and that's like, for somebody else, they have to go through 2 years of nebulous lack of no payment and just hoping that it works out, and then it probably will. Like, realistically, cashing out, you'll maybe get 100,000 or 200,000 or something, and it'll probably cover your costs, and you'll end up with a small buffer of value. But I don't want to be gambling for a year and a half and dealing with the stress of it. I'd rather
Yeah.
just say, I'd rather get paid a lot of money for a small thing, and then deal with my own stuff from that point on. So it just makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, and I view them kind of like really differently, like different career paths altogether. Because when you're creating a game, you're technically, creating a business, a franchise. You're taking all the risk. You're, like Jason said, 2 years potentially, probably even more in some cases, to really get
Mm.
from idea to full implementation and deployment, and getting some sort of payback from it.
But I
Um,
will say, though, Matt's got a good point. I certainly don't want to. I don't want to like sound like I'm down on the game thing.
yep.
Like, I'm not saying you don't have to make games, but I'm
Right.
saying I I treat the contracting as my job. That's what
Yeah.
pays my bills. That's what keeps the lights on. Whatever free time I have, I still work on my own stuff, and that's cool. And I can work on it. And the the difference is, my expectation for working on game stuff is that it's like buying a lottery ticket. It might do really well, and it might change my entire life. I might get enough money to build my own studio somewhere and really like build up stuff if I wanted to go that way. Um, but I'm not banking on it. I didn't quit my job to make a game. I didn't like go all in on something. Like, I'm not saying you have to like ignore games. I'm just saying that realistically, these days, I wouldn't say it's a particularly smart move to, without having proven yourself by working on other larger projects, to just deciding to make a game studio or make games. Like, I think you're a braver man than I for doing that. Like, I would rather I'd have enough
Incredibly
salary.
brave.
Yeah. I'd rather have the salary. And the thing about contracting, which is, if you work a 9 to 5 job, because I've again done that before, with the 9 to 5 job, you don't have a lot of free time, and you come home exhausted, and you don't really feel like working on stuff. And so that's a bit whatever. But if you're doing contract work, it tends to be high bursts of time and high bursts of resources. So I would work for 4 months and earn like 9 months worth of my income. And then I would have no work for 6 months. No projects are happening. I've got nothing to do, but I have enough money in the bank that it's covered my time. So now I actually have the bandwidth to work on things like game projects. So contracting is actually a good complement to building your own projects, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, yeah, that's the interesting thing about contracting too, is that you or freelancing, is that you might have a long dry period, but of course the jobs that you worked previously would have gotten you through that. So I've always looked at it like, wow, that's so stressful, because you just like you feel like you never know. But at the same time, I mean, working my day job, I mean Monday to Friday, and I work more than 40 hours a week. I am beholden to that. In the weekend, I'm thinking
Mm,
about what am I, like, my wife and I always kind of complain, because it's like Saturday is our day to just kind of unplug completely. But then Sunday, I'm already thinking like, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna have to stand up at 9:15, so I got to figure out what am I gonna talk about? What's the next week gonna bring? It's like you really only get 1.5 days off, you know. I would take the 6 months with the stress than having it be so consistently tied up with work, and like things like, only speaking from personal experience as someone who has a day job and doesn't freelance. um my side projects, like my hobbies, like Infallible Code, this channel, and any game that I would want to make, is all pretty much on the back burner when I'm at work, because that's my life. Is I need to focus on my day job, because that's the thing that's sustaining me in life. And yeah, it's just, there's so many ways to look at it. And then the full extreme of that is, oh, I'm going to be an indie game developer, I'm going to save up and then just quit my job and work on a game, my dream project for the next 2 years, and try to make that profitable. Is Yeah, it's different ballparks, it feels like.
and don't get me wrong, like, this isn't, you don't have to play either one or the other all of the time. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's equally as viable if your actual goal is to be a full-time game dev and work on your own projects. Like, there's no reason you can't start by doing contracting,
Right.
earn enough to kind of make yourself comfortable to put out your first game, and then use the winnings from your first game to put it into your second project, and then slowly pivot towards a full-time studio. I just think that if your options are try to work full time on some 9 to 5 job and do a game on the side, you're going to have a hard time. If it's going to be, I quit my job, I'm going to like go all in for a year and a half, you're going to have a hard time. Contracting is like the nice middle ground that lets you do a little bit of both and try to keep your sanity.
Yeah.
I just think I think in this day and age too, with everyone working from home, people understand now why there's a lot of value in the whole controlling your own sort of time and work. And I think a lot of companies post this apocalypse, if there is a post, will start pivoting in that direction, because I think there's value all around for people to be. Contracting is no longer this like weird side gig. I think it's going to become a more, I guess YouTube's a good example of this, self-promoted professionals who do their own stuff, who do their own channels and their own content and find their own revenue streams. And I think that's becoming more and more of a viable gig these days. I don't think people see it as this weird thing anymore.
Still kind of feels weird when I tell people I do YouTube.
I guess, to be honest, people still like, anytime anybody visits the house, they always pass by the office and they kind of like move slower and go, why is there lights and what's the yeah, so it's still a bit weird, but
Although
it's less weird.
it's definitely, yeah, it's less weird. I was on a meeting the other day with like a really stuffy meeting with some higher ups at a power company in the United States, and one of the gentlemen on the calls was like, "Ooh, or do you do podcasts? Is that a streaming setup?" It's like, sure is. It's like the funny, like I never would like this guy was like, in his like mid-50s, like executive level, gray hair. He's like, "Oh, do you do like with his spectacles? Do you do podcasts, son?"
I had the exact opposite. I had in an old estate I used to live in, I had a big sliding door that was facing out into the street, and again, my office looked kind of like a YouTuber office. It had lights, it had the rig, it had the whole lot, and so you had kids from running up and down the street, like knocking on the window. Do you do YouTube? So yeah, I've had that on both sides.
That's funny. It's definitely becoming more of a common thing. It's in the purview of more people's minds.
Yeah, and again, I think another thing too, and I think looking at someone like Matt too is a good example. Actually, yeah, and again Don as well. It's kind of diversified revenue streams, right? Like we live in a world now where being somebody who does this kind of stuff, there's synergy to everything. Like, to be honest about it, doing stuff like this builds my profile, which gets more people to know me, who then reach out to me to do work and so on. And sort of, so like it all flows into each other. This whole YouTubing thing it doesn't have to be separate jobs anymore. Again, look at a lot of people look at Thomas Brush and Noah from Blackthorn Cloud. Like these are people who are they're if you say they're YouTubers, they're not YouTubers. They're actually, they create courses, they create content, they create games as well. Like these are people who do a lot of stuff because it all flows into the same resources, right? It flows into if you learn something new, that's now an avenue to make a video about it. It's also an avenue for something to apply to a project. It's also something that is going to help with other stuff. And with contracting too, I can honestly say I've learned 2 new technologies in the last 3 weeks that I would never have bothered learning myself. Not I wanted to eventually, I just hadn't gotten around to it. But I learned it on the job for a client that I now have, that other clients have come to us to ask for stuff, and we've pitched that as things we can add because I've learned them on a different project. So it's like I'm almost being paid to learn at the same time. Yeah. So there's a lot of synergy to the kind of stuff you're doing, and I think there's a lot to be said for this whole YouTuber thing, not as this like either gimmicky or side job, but as genuinely, it's just a way to engage with people these days. It's like if you went back in time and told people about things like Facebook profiles and stuff. It's like, what, you put all of your you volunteer to put all of your data on a page and just like let people just look at it all. Is like, what is, and it's like these days the next step up is let's go one step further. Let's not only demonstrate who we are online, but like what we can do online. Like right. let's explain to people content, and let's talk about tutorials and stuff we can do. And you're now like these days anybody can throw up a profile and write whatever they want on it, but it's much harder to fake genuinely educating people about stuff or genuinely talking about projects you enjoy and stuff like that. Stuff you could probably do it, but it's not worth the mental energy of faking an entire like life personality and training on the YouTube channel. It's more like, it's much easier just to be authentic about it and find people who like the stuff you do. And again, it all sort of self-feeds into the same stuff.
It's interesting because like my experience in hiring is whenever I talk to developers that I want to bring onto my team, like one of the main things I always ask is, can you just tell me about something you've worked on and that you've were passionate? Like it could be anything. It could be a side project. Maybe you automated something in your home with a Python script or something you worked for in another company. company, obviously I'm looking for them to demonstrate how they could provide value to me. But
Mm,
if they can just speak passionately about something, then I trust that if there's any technology that they don't know that my company uses and I need them to learn, I feel like I'm confident that they'll be able to pick it up, because you can just you can just tell, and I can just tell because I've worked in the opposite scenario where I worked for a local city of Miami, and that was sort of like a bureaucratic job where even the developers were just like, um, I can't even think of a nice way to put it. They're just lifers, Another term for it is like expert beginners, where it's like
mm.
that you could work in a position for 20 years and never really learn or become an expert. You're just doing the same thing you did the first day on the job, and that's how it is with the developers at the. That's really mean. I don't want to like. There's a lot of great developers in the city of Miami, but the general air and culture is you could pretty much sit at your desk with your heads down and never innovate and never really have to learn any new technology. And a lot of people would take advantage of that. So, when I interview people in a traditional sense, where I'm asking them to join my team and have a salaried position, I'm looking for them to explain what it is you can do, and just I'm looking for passion in their voice. I'm looking for them to say, "Oh, I ran into this problem, but I researched it and I finally figured it out."
Mm.
And I think that is the same thing as what you do when now. What I'm doing, I'm posting on my channel. I'm demonstrating that I'm so interested in programming and game
I'm
development that
spending my free time building entire content. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think too, the other thing is like, I 100% agree. I've also met, I used to call them work to rule developers. They would work to the letter of the law and do exactly what they need to and then leave, which is fine. Like I used to really dislike those kinds of people where it felt
Mm,
like they really treated programming as just like any assembly line job.
right.
And I used to kind of almost feel it like an affront. Like these are people in my career or field and they're sort of treating it like it's some random sort of pointless thing, and they don't respect patterns or learning how to
Like
get
an
better at
assembly
stuff.
line, just sort of like
Yeah,
knocking things out.
but I had my own little epiphany where I was like, you know what, to them that's what it is, and
Hmm.
that's kind of fine. Like for example, when you brush your teeth in the morning, that's like a passive thing you do, but there are people who are dental hygienists who like they live and breathe every bit of documentation about it, all of that stuff, and to see you sort of passively disregarding what to them is a big deal is kind of the same thing. And once you realize that there's not a single thing in your life that there isn't somebody who treats it like it's really really important, from everything like random stamps to how you align your cables to the audio equipment you use. So like I felt like there's no value in being priggish anymore about sort of that there being some power to this. But I will say I don't want to work with people who don't care about it. So I guess the difference is I think the universe is perfectly fine having people who feel that way,
Right.
but I find you will do better if people believe you like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You will like as like people will want to work with you more. You'll be forwarded onto more teams. You'll have more offers and stuff. So this is less about saying it's a bad thing and more about saying that's fine if you're like in your 50s working as a DBA and you've been doing it for 30 years using the same Haskell library, and you're like as well like just sort of you're basically clocking in, making sure the company still exists, the data doesn't go anywhere. That's if you want to just clock in, clock out, all power to you.
Hmm.
But if you're somebody who is hiring people, you don't want to hire somebody like that unless you are literally hiring them to maintain something in a passive state all of the time.
Yeah.
And realistically, that's not the case in most cases. So it's usually want to hire somebody who is genuinely engaged and passionate. And one small note on that too, like Charles said, is that so it is like it's like a portfolio. It's like this sort of you're broadcasting what you're interested in. And I find this is more valuable these days because I can't speak for everybody else, but I've noticed I just don't have time to maintain the previous programmer metric of hobby and interest. People used to say, "What is your GitHub? Let's see your
Uh-huh.
projects." They'd bring up the chart and go, "Does he have green dots? Is he actually committing regularly to personal projects? Is he a passionate developer?" I mean, that sounds great, but I'll be honest, I don't have time for that. Like, I can't let people measure me as a like how passionate or interested or how engaged I am by some arbitrary set of commits to
Uh-huh.
some library. I need to demonstrate it in a way that's commensurate with my life, and that would be being involved in communities. Because to me, that's as we said, it's like double dipping. I get to create content, I get to demonstrate that value, but it's also valuable to me and my God help me brand. Like And that's more valuable than me just arbitrarily making a small project and just regularly committing it to it just so that I have green dots that look great on interviews and stuff, you know. So it's just, I think, the way things are going, this is just a better approach for your whatever. Like, this is slightly up brand too. Like, we're supposed to be talking about contracting, but this is more about why there's value in creating content, I guess. But I think again, like, it all still flows into each other.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, it all goes back to constantly demonstrating that you're someone of value, and then people will hire you. So it does tie back, but
Yeah.
you also have to be purposeful about it. Like myself, I have spent many hours, and I'm thinking about this as we talk. I put so much time and energy into this channel, and just I love it. I'm passionate about it, but I've never really leveraged it in any way to my benefit per se, other than like I've built the community up around it, and that's great. But I certainly could be, I should be eating my own dog food here, and understanding that like I could be getting freelance work if I really put my mind to it. So there's speaking from someone who's experienced this, you do need to be purposeful about not only participating in communities, but positioning yourself more, and reaching out to folks who reach out to you, and communicating, and being someone that is easy to talk to. And I think that's something that I've been working on more recently, as you guys have seen in the Discord server. I pop into social all the
Well,
time now.
well, like I said, to me, like, I'm not a very spiritual person. I
Sure.
don't. I don't. Let's say I have a very hard time trying to meditate. But what I will say is I believe in almost a more clinical version of the concept of karma,
Mm,
which is just because I don't see it as sort of, universal energy. I see it more as just generally, it's like you like people you want to work with, and
mhm.
you want to work with people you like, and it's sort of, so just by the sheer nature of like rolling the dice multiple times by saying I was nice to this person has a 2% chance of wanting some work in the future. That's a rolling a dice. And then every new person you meet, every new person you're nice to, it's not like a general, putting, karma, positive energy. It's more just like, literally, if I don't, so to your point, Charles, about like actively engaging and looking for contract work, I think that's one of those things where, to me, I'm more of a like, it'll come
Mhm.
mentality. And again, not from a like universal provide way, but in a more,
Yeah.
the sheer act of what you're doing is just something that leads to this
Yeah.
kind of work. And that's why, like I said, I just don't, I don't feel it's valuable to me anymore to be sort of like standing on my soapbox going, code for sale, code, I can produce code. Like,
Extra,
it's just not
extra.
where I am. Yeah. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Um, right. So let's just like check where we are in the list, and we'll dot through stuff here. So how much did I charge? The what to do. Okay, yeah. So we talked about how figure out what they want, try to figure out the value. Figure out what the complex or moving parts are going to be, what's going to change, what you need to put extra resources into, and if you do know what those things are, over budget rather than under budget to make sure that you can cover it.
Mhm.
Um, I have something here as well about perspective, and we covered it in the last one, so I don't want to belabor it either. But just a firm reminder: um, if your mindset is what you have to do to get the job done, that's going to be far less successful for you than if their mindset is what do I have to do to make this project succeed,
Mm.
because you'll often find things will change, and if things change, you can look at it one of two ways. Either this damn client has gone and like pulled the rug out from under me, and now I have to like throw this away or work on this stuff, and it can be really annoying. You feel
Yeah.
like you're being sort of screwed with, and you can be angry about that. Or you could say, I want this project to succeed. If it succeeds, they're happy, which means they'll want to work with me again, which means more money for me, which means more opportunity for me. So a change that is something you can deal with is a positive, not a negative, because it means the
Yeah.
project is more likely to end up being the thing that they want. If there are things that come up that are changing, and you turn them down and say, nope, wasn't the budget, we can't afford to do that, or we can't do this, they will end up with a project that's subpar or not to the spec they wanted, and then they'll be unhappy about it, and that unhappiness will translate to them just not wanting to work with you anymore. So make your perspective their project succeeding, not fulfilling the exact spec of the work that you're given.
Yeah. Yeah, that type of rigidity is never gonna pan out well. I mean, especially if you're a game developer and you're trying to, again, risk 2 years of your life on a project. You can't be rigid. You have to be flexible and say, and have the perspective of what will what will make this project successful. And in the context of working with a client, success is defined by them and what they're trying to get out of you, the value they're trying to get, and you need to work to see what that is. And if you are a solo developer and you're making your own game, success to you is not going bankrupt and losing your livelihood because you were so desperate to get this crafting system just right. And success for me as someone who works 40 hours a week is making sure that my company is still in business week after week so I continue to get a paycheck to some respect. But that's a cynical view. Realistically, my success for my company and myself is that I'm providing value and I'm not lazy, and I'm making sure that our clients are happy. So
And this is again, like, this is one of those things where I think this mindset will drastically change a lot of decisions you make.
mhm,
Like, again, if your mindset is, I will build this code or do this system because that's what's in the spec,
mhm,
you will find yourself putting time and effort into stuff. Like, if you're doing a crafting system, you might like over engineer certain areas because you're having fun and you're like, well, I'm going to make the best ever crafting system. And I'm going to, like, I don't care if they need the features. I will make the best one because then they can't complain because I made a really awesome system. But if you step back and realize the goal is to make their project succeed, you might actually write a less modular or less powerful or less feature filled system because it's more in line with what they need, and you're going to put your resources elsewhere. And so there's a lot of decisions that will change if you focus on making their project succeed.
yeah.
And I find that, like, throughout your day, you'll actually find yourself, like, I've literally been halfway through something and went, what am I doing? This won't help the client. Like, they don't need this. And I will literally just stop and go back to my drawing board. Let's write down the notes of what our meeting said, what I should do. And I realized that I was indulging my own interests rather than actively working on the project.
What was that video I shared with you the other day? I was this developer, so funny. The multi-threading one. I forget who it was.
Oh yeah, his channel, his stuff is great. Yeah.
He has a bit in the middle of it where he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna optimize. I'm gonna optimize the way the map loads." And he starts working on it. He's like, "Wait a second. Oh, progress.
Randall, yeah, that's the one.
Randall. So funny."
Very funny.
And like progress busts down the wall and is like, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop that!" Or he starts whipping
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
It's true. Like in the name of
Uh,
progress, like you don't need to stop and refactor some systems. So that's a good lesson for anyone,
mm,
realistically.
yeah. Right. So yeah. So basically, respect for the project, what you're doing.
hmm
Oh, I have this in all caps because it's very important. Explain. Changes are not free and are not infinite. This is something that, especially if you've ever worked in an artistic field, you'll know this more than anybody else. Fiverr is a great example. They will literally,
Mm.
anybody who's done it longer than, if you're new, this is one of those things where it's a red flag. And I think it's, if you see somebody who's offering to do some sort of concept art or some sort of drawing for you, and they say unlimited revisions, what they're
Oof.
really saying is, I need this work. I will bend over to help you, whatever you need to do to get this working, and I'll bend over backwards to help you. And the problem is, you're like, well, why do they need it this much? Either
Mm.
they're not getting much work because they don't have a lot of clients, because people don't want to work with them. Like, it puts that in the back of your head, is like, that kind of worries me.
Yeah.
If a client says, if someone's offering work and they say, you can have 2 revisions, or we can have a discussion and the rest will cost more and we'll rediscuss those later. And it's like, okay, that means they are giving me enough, they're being polite enough that they understand it won't work the first time, or they won't be like perfectly matched to my opinion. But they have a healthy respect for their own time. So I think that is one of those things that I make a point of saying, is
Yeah.
don't allow yourself to be steamrolled by them going, oh, can you make it blue? Can you move it a bit left? Can you do this? It's like,
Uh-huh.
if this is requiring you to make a new Unity build every time, it says, just say, look, no, I'm sorry. Like, it's taking too long making these tiny changes for whatever. Make a list of things you want done, and I'll do them as one change set. Or if something like goes beyond the scope where we all agreed on something and it moved on, I will pull them aside and I'll say, look, here's where we're at. You have a deadline you told me you need to meet. We can either continue the way we are to meet this deadline, or we can happily do your changes, but it's going to cost 2 more things. It's going to cost more time and more money. And that's realistically where we have to look at this. And the question becomes, what's more valuable to you? That being said, I'm willing to work with you to get this done. So the question is there something that we had before that is going to change, you don't need anymore, that this is more important? That's fine, we can do that. But one way or another, we need to find a way of balancing this, because it doesn't balance as it currently stands. And the example I use is a concept from kind of Scrum mentality is the whole
Mhm.
idea of having items and then like t-shirt sizes or a cost of items. And I will like arbitrarily go through it and I'll go, okay, you asked for these 10 things. We've had a discussion. I know these 4 are mandatory. You need those for the project. But these ones are the things that we have left in the backlog that are kind of nice to haves. These are the new things you kind of want done. And I've put a rough cost of time. That's a 4, that's a 10. These don't really translate to hours or minutes or anything. They're just like vague numbers. But
Right.
you can kind of tell a 10 is bigger than 2 4s, right? Like that's just generally a sensible thing to understand. So you could say, figure this out. I'll give you 15 points to spend. Pick the things that matter to you, and we'll fit them into the project. So that's sort of like finding that line between genuinely working to make their product the best it can be, but not shooting yourself in the foot by just arbitrarily working for free on endless variations of something that are going to take up your time.
Yeah, there has to be a line in the sand that you say, "Hey, look, if I was here to make the project the best it would be, and you had unlimited hours, and you didn't have to charge me, then I could be here till I'm dead, making this thing amazing." So there's got to be some point where you say, "I'm gonna make it the best I could be. I can make it given the constraint of how much you can afford to pay me and the time on the project."
Mm-hmm. And a similar thing is true for things like meetings. Some
Mm,
clients want constant updates. They literally like bake it into the contract. You have to be on our Slack. You have to join our morning stand-up meetings. You have to go to this stuff. And I'll usually say fine at the start, and I'll try to assess the value of them. But if I'm going to meetings and I feel like I'm just sitting there for 20 minutes while they go through their rigmarole of stand-up, I'll
yeah.
just pull them aside and I'll say, look, you want me to work on this project? You don't really need me in these. How about I join every third one and we'll catch up on what I'm doing? Especially clearly, like for example, if you're bringing me into a morning meeting that takes 30 minutes, and you're spending the first 20 minutes talking about your business marketing strategy and stuff like that, it's like I'm not going to be able to contribute there. And so you want me working on code instead for your project that's more valuable to you. Um, Unless, like I said, because I don't see myself as a coder, I see myself as adding value to a project. If I feel like they're discussing stuff that falls into things like UX or game design or level design, which is some situations I'm in, I want to be there because I feel like I have stuff that I can add to that. So I will say, actually, here's some interesting research I read on this, that, or the other. So it doesn't, anywhere I think I'm adding value, I'll try and add value. It's just, I won't let my time be wasted effectively if possible.
Right.
And so sometimes you might just have to put your foot down and say, look, I'll give you updates, but if you want me to like stop and write you a report every like 2 days, I like
Not gonna
that
happen.
doesn't help either of us. Yeah, it's not going to help either of us. And I think that's the thing too, is you're not framing it as your demands are wasting my time. You should be framing it as you want me working on this, and I understand you want visibility in what we're doing. Let's find a compromise. How can I give you enough visibility, but also not spend every fucking 5 minutes writing a giant document on something, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and it's important that you mention that, framing it in the context of the value that you're providing to them, and do it authentically. You have to say, look, these meetings are inhibiting my ability to provide value to the project.
Mm,
And that's it. And hopefully they'll be okay with it. But it's a hard to argue against that.
yeah. Here's another point that I think is very important. And if you start doing this stuff, you'll notice a very common thread here. You'll feel like, what if I'm not getting enough guidance?
Hmm.
What if sometimes a client has said, "Oh, I need you to make this thing." Okay, bye now. We've got a trade show in 3 weeks. Hope it's ready. And you're thinking, what if it's like, I don't know if this is right, and if they don't tell me now, I won't have time to fix it. And so you're panicking, going, I need you to respond to my email. Just
Mhm.
give me a thumbs up, or tell me, do you want me to do A or B? I need to know before I start, and you're wasting my time. And I'm panicking because we're getting close to a deadline and I don't have it done. And yeah, you can get pretty stressed by that. And the question, if what do you do if you feel like the client isn't giving you enough information? The truth is, you'll almost always feel like that. I think I've worked on two projects where the client gave me an insane sheet that had all of the requirements in this like beautifully detailed. This is exactly what they want. They've clearly planned this before, and it's even explained in a way that's like, I don't feel like they're. Sometimes you'll get like a businessy sheet, which is sort of like they think they've described it, but what they've really just done is written, value and profit and enterprise. It's like, no, I can't make this. How do I manifest a engaging experience? Give me, like, does that mean it's red or does that mean it's fucking orange? I don't know what that means to you. But in some cases you will get really good spec, but that's normally not the case. Normally what happens is You'll be given this vague collection of requirements, and then you're supposed to just manifest it into existence. And the reason why, the hidden secret to this, is what the client is secretly not saying by saying that is, I'll know it when I see it. So I
Mm,
want you to make it, I want to try it, and I want to tell you whether it's good or not, and then I want you to do the real one once I know of whether I want it or not. And so you have to understand that's secretly what the real argument is behind the scenes, is they don't know the answer yet, and they don't, and that's, to be honest, fair. Like, it's understandable that how could they know, especially because we have people coming to us looking for like VR projects and they've never done VR. They just know VR is cool and they want to make
yeah.
something VR. So if I go to a client who's never made a VR thing before and said, right, locomotion, do you want teleport? Do you want blink? Do you want to use raycast? Are we going to use a parabola for the teleport? Like, they're like, what is, I
I don't
don't
know any
know
of that.
what's good. I don't know what's good. And the thing is that they're paying for your experience on that. So what you want to do in that scenario is just, like, that's where your experience comes in. Just make best guess, make thing, and do it quickly. So make a quick and dirty prototype of whatever it is you need to do, show it to them, and then realistically, if they don't come back with notes, consider that a success. It's
Mm,
not very satisfying,
yeah.
but realistically, if you've been upfront and if you've done your job, and like I said way back at the start, if you don't, if you just take the spec and run with it, then you will have that moment halfway through the project where they're like, oh, this is not what I expected, and then you'll freak out. But if you do the first thing I said, which is get to know the project and try to add value to it, you shouldn't be surprised, because you should understand what they want to do, even if they can't articulate it, even if they don't really know. If they get a sense that you understand what the objective is and what the feeling of the project should be, and then you go away and do it, they're going to defer to your judgment, except for whenever it's obviously misaligned. So in that
Right.
case, whenever you get thumbs up, it's like, okay, cool, it's on track. They don't see it as a, should it be red? Should it be this? So, like, you're not going to get those very clean details. What you're going to instead is get a, we want this made. We hired you to do it. Go and do it. And if it's like glaringly wrong, they'll call you out on it. But other than that, like, you're probably fine. So don't get too worried if you're not getting enough like hand holding that you feel like you need for guidance. Because that used to freak me out. That used to be my thing. I used to literally say, I am not going to continue working till I get a fucking email to tell me this is what you want, because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going off on this nebulous side tangent. And it took me a while to realize how that doesn't help anybody. That's just me being obstinate for no reason. So now it's like, you have to accept that that's part of your job. Part of the stress you take on is bridging that gap between them not knowing and you sort of trying to figure it out. And the best thing you could do for yourself is do it before you start working. Try to
Yeah.
figure it out by understanding the project. And if you understand the project, not the specific task, like I said, if they want an inventory system, whatever, but if you understand why they want an inventory system
Yeah.
and what feeling they want the inventory system to provoke or whatever, you can actually make some of those decisions yourself. You don't have to wait for handholding because you already know what the goal is. So you can try to move it in that direction and you're less likely to be off base.
Yeah, and eventually you're gonna have to make some concessions where you think you know better, and but the client wants something, and I think at the end of the day, obviously you're trying to provide them value in whatever endeavor they're on as a company, but at the same time, you almost have to. I think you almost have to accept that, like, if they feel it's right, even if you have some sort of itching suspicion that you wouldn't have done it that way, or you don't like how the UI might look or feel on some section or whatever, as long as they feel that you did a good job, that truly is the most important thing at the end of the day.
And that does happen. Like, I have worked on stuff where it's like, they're like, oh, it's lovely. And I'm said, okay, look, let me just explain a few things. There are web
Guidance.
safe colors. There are, when you're supposed to be doing stuff in VR, large motions are going to make people feel sick. I mean, you may like this, but that's possibly going to be a thing for clients. And as long as you flag them up and you say, personally, I would do this instead of this, and they're like,
Yeah.
no, no, we like it like this. Fine, because you've delivered what they want. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely don't put your foot down and say, no, this is not the right way to, like, obviously the point is to make the client happy, but at the end of the day, like I said, if you go one step past that, it's not to make the client happy in this moment, it's to make the client happy that the project's a success.
Mhm.
And if you think compromising your own whatever to make the project fit the client is going to hurt them in the long run because it'll make their consumers sick, or it'll be something that won't be received well, it's not your job to like force them to do it. But if you can at least flag it up, you could say, look, I've done a lot of these, you hired me because I do a lot of this, and I'm telling you now, this will be not received well, you should
Yeah.
do this instead. And if you at least do that, it's their decision. Now they can
Right.
decide to trust you or not, and I think that's the best compromise you can get.
That's a CYA move. It's short for cover your ass. I do those every day at work. Send an email to someone saying I looked into something or I did this. It's like I'm just covering my ass here. Cool.
Okay, so we're a little bit further now. The next one I have here is it's okay to fail.
Ooh,
I think that's another one. It's an interesting note to make.
sounds like a great video title. Yeah, clickbaity video. It's okay to fail, but it
Oh,
is.
and yes, as a final note on what Matt said before too, is that actually that's another thing that I do a lot. I probably should have mentioned is a good point. Is if you are worried that a client is either doesn't really know what they want or that you're having a hard time gauging what they want, I mean that's what pitch decks and stuff are for. Like
Mm,
you can, if you're worried that you're about to go off on a big tangent, like I will full on go to YouTube and I will find gameplay clips
mm,
of games or stuff that have a particular moments, and I will say, look, here is 4 different examples. Here is a teleport. Here's a thing. Here's whatever. Which one looks right to you? And at least that way you can get a good example. So if you can bring up any kind of reference or guide, I'll often do that. Like for example, if a client is telling me I want to do project X, I will say, oh yeah, that reminds me of this game. Have you heard of that? Or oh, actually, there's a system like that I've seen in this. And that serves 2 purposes. One, it lets you know if that's actually the right angle. But two, oftentimes that's actually reference material they want to see. Like a
mm.
client likes, like if you're working on a project and someone says, hey, did you know your game is like this? You're like, oh, cool. I'll research that, see what worked or didn't work about that. And that's valuable information for me to have. So I find people are happy when you point out stuff that feels like what they're doing, because it generally like lets them know that they're on the right track if it's well received, and it means you can be certain that you get what they really mean.
Right.
So yeah, the whole like having reference material, pointing stuff out, and using existing content as either a touchstone between you and them is a very valuable thing to do.
Right.
Um, yeah, and again, because at the end of the day, they're hiring you because of your specialty in this area. So if a client comes to me and says, "I want this kind of gamer experience," I mean, there's a very good chance I know a lot more about what exists in that space like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I probably have a lot more references they may not have seen that I can point out. Um,
Especially in
so I'll have,
more obscure situations like VR, where a lot of people just don't
mm,
have experience with it.
yeah, like I've full on come away from meetings where I've said, you know what, I'm going to make you a list of videos to watch so
Mm,
that we can like, because you'll want to see these if you're doing this kind of project.
yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, the okay to fail bit. So like we said last time, and there's a little bit of a, I don't want to say contention, but sort of confusion around the question when we said you can't really get sick as a contractor.
Oh yeah.
Um, what just to really highlight what we kind of meant by that is not that you can't get sick. No one's going to like, feet to the fire if you do. The point is you can't really afford to get sick because it's going to cost you one way or another. It's either going to delay their project, which means when you come back, you're going to be panicking and you're going to have to be catching up with stuff, or you're going to be in a position to just not earn money. But all that being said, you are allowed to not succeed. Now, the truth is, if you're working on a project and something comes up and it feels like you're not going to hit the deadline, or it feels like turns out that you can't do the thing you need to do, it is far better to say, turns out I've tried doing this thing and we're having difficulty. There's some network issues that I haven't experienced before.
Mm,
And this comes back to that line again. We might need to find someone for this. And
mm.
this comes down to we both want this to succeed. I am honest in establishing the fact that right now I'm not the person to do that. I thought I was. I tried to. We're hitting a point now where it's buffing up against what I can do.
Mhm.
But I don't want this to fail. I want this to succeed for you. So let's just pause, take stock of where we are, take stock of what's left to do, and figure out where we go from here. So you can fail. Just make sure that you're not failing and leaving them
Yeah.
screwed effectively. So usually flag that up early. If you feel like you're genuinely floundering in a project, don't just try to head down and get through it. You're
Yeah.
far better off saying like, you know what, I took this project. I know it's got 3 weeks to go. I really thought I could get this done, but there's some stuff in here I haven't seen before, or there's stuff that's like, it turns out this API is more confusing than I thought it was. I'm trying to figure it out, but realistically, I don't know if I will figure out how to do it in the deadline. So our options are either either just be aware that we're going to possibly have to extend this, or maybe you might want to find someone else, or maybe you want to see if we can find someone to work with me on this. Like as long as you give them the choice to do something about it, it's
Yeah.
probably going to make your life easier.
Because it's better to do it up front too, because the worst case scenario in that situation is they get upset, they say, "Oh, you know what, we're not going to continue working with you," or whatever the case may be, and they go find someone and they're, maybe
Mm.
they're happy. They get the value that they're looking for. And unfortunately it wasn't with you. But I think a
Yeah.
worst case scenario is you wait to the last possible minute, you get heads down, you try to figure it out yourself. Maybe you produce something, in this mad rush where you have no work life balance and you're just trying to solve it. But generally speaking, I still don't think it'll be what they ended up wanting, in the
Mm.
long run. So you'll hurt yourself in that sense,
Yeah.
because they'll say, well, we worked with this guy, he delivered what, I guess what we asked, but it just wasn't good. So then you
And
screw
this is this.
yourself.
Yeah, this is the thing too. And I've done this on both sides, which is like, I have hired people on Fiverr, seen the project come back, and it's so far from what I wanted it to be that I looked at it and went, there is no number of revisions that will
Yeah.
get this to where I need it to be. Um, and I just have gone, okay, thank you. And then
Yeah.
I'm done. And realistically, it's unfair to them, but they don't know that they've just lost me forever as a client. And I mean, normally I would give people a chance. That's not a very common occurrence because you can kind of tell when there's something to salvage. I just mean when it feels like they fundamentally didn't even read the brief, or they're not even trying to be on the same page as me, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
They're not
Um,
communicating, and yeah.
yeah, and if that's the case, and I can honestly say there was two clients that I'm pretty sure over the course of the entire time I've ever worked where they politely said thank you and then I never heard from them again. And like they weren't angry or unhappy enough that there was ever friction on the project. It was just the end result was like, this isn't what we hoped it would be. I feel a bit bummed about the whole thing. I'm going to brush it under the rug and never think about it again. And these were earlier on. And I think that was because of exactly what I said earlier. I was trying to deliver what they ask for, not what they want.
Mm,
When I did that, there's a much higher chance they'll get something back that they're just not happy with.
yeah.
And I think the goal being, now that I pivot more towards trying to reach their actual objective, it doesn't happen very often because it's one of those things where it's like, even if it fails, they feel like it failed, and you are all running towards the same goal, and you just tripped. It feels like you were on their side right to the end, which I think is a far better position to be in for both sides than feeling like you failed to deliver something as like a separate person to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because
Yeah.
I experience it all the time, like in my day job, where a developer will go work on a ticket. We work the tickets and come back, and it's just like, what is this? And I find that, on both ends, it'll be an issue where they didn't really ask what, or they didn't really understand what was the true desire of this particular feature or whatever UI. But then there'll be sometimes where it's like, I look at the ticket and it's like I didn't really articulate a why here. I just said, hey, we need the ability to do this, and they slam something in, and it's like, well, it's missing error checking on this particular thing or that, or the UI doesn't really feel good, and it's like I never really articulated the whole point of this feature was to make the life of the user easy when they're doing this particular task or something like that. And really, it just makes it harder for them now because it's just some shoddy UI or something, which is like, it's only shoddy if you look at it from the lens of what it is that I actually wanted out of the thing.
And this is actually another thing. It's great advice. If you are hiring somebody, some kind of contractor or somebody to do some work, um, it can feel like you're doing the smart thing by getting this really clinical brief and giving
Uh,
them, I want a thing, I want it red, I want it circular, I want this. And you feel like you're like, I've got it right. But the thing is, if you get that back exactly as you asked for, and it's not what you want, we're back at this position where it's like you'll begrudgingly feel like you have to accept it because they did exactly what you asked for, and you don't like it, and you're
yeah,
gonna like be really bummed out, and you're not going to want to work with them again. And the thing is, you've now done them a disservice by trying to do the right thing. And so I find it's a far better solution to give them something to try to work with you on. So
mm,
even if they're not bridging the gap for you, do it for them.
yeah,
So whenever I'm working with somebody, I will say, right, let me tell you about the project. Here's what we're doing. Here's what our goal is. Here's why we think it's a good idea. Like, we think it's valuable for this, this, and this. And sometimes it's worth asking their advice and say, what do you think? Like, you're the person who's in VR, and this, we don't do VR, but we kind of think people would really get a kick out of this in our project and this and whatever. And they'll normally work with you at that point. And once you can effectively get them as a contractor to buy in to your project, they're going to do all of the stuff we said as kind of like bend over backwards more to help you because they feel like they're invested in the project succeeding now, as opposed to clinically hitting the notes that you gave.
right.
So if you're hiring somebody, make a point of like telling them, this is what the goal is. This is why we're doing it. This is the project I want to make. And it's a great way of gauging whether you're going to work well with them. Because if they come back with, that's a great idea. In fact, here's some links to stuff like it. Like I said earlier, if you
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
fall into that category, you know you're going to have a good working relationship.
yeah, yeah. It all ties in.
Hmm. Right. So that's the "it's okay to fail" line. That took half an hour.
Well,
um,
we are at the hour and a half mark, so I don't know if you had any particular direction you wanted to go, if you wanted to call it here and see if we can pick up with a third part.
uh, I
Maybe the
don't
third part
know.
is dedicated strictly to the code, so we didn't get into this.
Yeah, maybe. Because I kind of let me just see if there's anything here to skim before. Because I don't want to do this a third time without going to the code. So I think the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
time
for
should definitely
sure.
be code. Um, okay, let me just see if there's anything else. Uh, oh yeah, when I said earlier about the changes, when clients do come back with changes and you come to an agreement that you are changing the deadline or something, if it is going to change how long it takes, or going to change, or there's going to be different budget stuff, get it in writing.
Hmm.
This may sound like clinical, and I hope at least up to now I've been very clear that I'm trying to build a good work relationship. So it's not about holding feet to the fire. It's about, up till now, like, you do want a good work relationship for everyone involved, but things happen. And one of the most disappointing feelings is when you worked on a project, you felt like it went well. There was some weird disconnect, or something went wrong, or somebody screws someone else over by accident. Everyone gets annoyed and leaves on bad terms. And then later on, you hear, like, from the grapevine that history has changed. And people are like, oh, well, actually, they were massively over time and they didn't do the thing, whatever. And
Right.
you're like, no, but you asked me for 2 months of extra work in the middle of that project. And then you wondered why the deadline didn't hit. And it's like, that makes you feel horrible. It makes your whole thing go wrong. It's better off for you that, like, and because again, people don't even do this on purpose. I've worked with clients who afterwards they felt like, oh, you said it was going to deliver on time, whatever, and they kind of, well, no, I don't blame you, but I feel disappointed it didn't deliver. And then you can say, oh, well, let me just send you this email. Remember when you said this, we did this thing, that was an extra 3 weeks of work, that accounts for where there was extra time, and take whatever. And then, like, I've had people go, oh yeah, I forgot about that, like, that's, oh
Mm.
yeah, sorry, like, I forgot that, like, 3 months ago we gave you complete changes to the original spec, and that was going to change the deadline. So it's not even often meant as a mean thing. It's very easy to have a revisionist view of history when you've got a long project and, like, stuff goes wrong. Like, I've worked on projects that were meant to be split up into, like, 5 parts, and then it became 3 parts, and then an extra part was added afterwards. So by the end of it, it's 3 parts plus a new part, not the original 5 parts. And when somebody then looks at it from the top down view and says, oh, it took this amount of time to do the project, their mind is, it took this amount of time to do this project,
Hmm.
not the spec that was originally written for the original project. So if stuff changes drastically, make sure, even if you have a big meeting and everyone's like, oh, it's not going to work, okay, we're all in agreement, we're now doing this. I always say, somebody write it down, email it, and we'll pass it around. I just want history to validate what we've all agreed on. And so just make a point, if there's something going to happen like that, make sure somebody emails somebody. And often, and it's weird to me, this is such an odd thing, this isn't done as much as it should be.
Mm.
Like sometimes people get surprised or affronted or feel like you're sort of saying, why, we were agreeing. I said, look, rather than, like, explain all of what I just said, I normally say, sometimes I forget stuff. Just for my peace of mind, can you just write it down and send it to me, just so that I have a copy, just in case I
That's
forget. And
CYA, man. Cover your
yeah,
ass.
exactly. Um, so yeah, it's just make it. And again, same thing goes in reverse. If you're hiring someone or you're working with people, like, it'll make your life and their life easier if there is some accountability for what's going on. Just make a point of having, like Matt highlighted, meeting notes is a great one. Like, I've started doing that in the last year, and it's invaluable. I will literally, no matter what the meeting, it could be just a boring one, I will have a notepad and I'll just start,
Hmm.
like, writing notes. And it's probably mostly gibberish, but it's just like, if something comes up, I'll at least remember vaguely that, like, oh, a couple of weeks back, because, like I've worked on stuff where someone said, something, we're working with this person on this thing, and I can just, like, pull up a file and say, that was like 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, you mean blank from blank? It's like, yeah, that's that person. It's like,
Yeah.
just to have that name means that it's good to remember these kinds of things, and it's like having a mini database for a project. It's worth keeping this stuff for multiple reasons.
I send so many per hour conversation emails per our discussion. This is what you want. Please let me know if and I always frame it like this. Please let me know if I've missed anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's just giving an opportunity to really just say, hey, look, we had a conversation, a verbal conversation. We touched on a lot of things, agreed on a lot of things. Here's what we talked about. Did I miss anything? And hopefully it'll trigger them to read it and be like, oh, wait, you misunderstood this. This isn't what I actually wanted, what you've captured here. I mean, it's awful, but I do this a lot during verbal conversations too, where I
Yeah.
will say, all right, so let me stop you. I really want to just summarize what you just said. So you're looking for an app in which the user can search for themselves using their fingerprint. Okay, I just want to let you know that to do that, we're going to need to leverage an SDK, or we're going to have to do this and that. It's just it, and maybe they'll say, well, no, you don't really have to use your fingerprint. They can also just type in their name. Okay, so is the fingerprint thing a stretch goal? Like,
Yeah, like if it's not that important, can we actually push that to the side and focus more on the other stuff? And all of a sudden, you can like find different requirements of the project.
it just opens up opportunities to have further
Yeah.
discussion and really understand. Because on the flip side of that, I've oh my gosh, I've had so many times where my bosses come in saying, hey, you know that feature that we have in the product that is X, Y, and Z? And you're like, no, that's not in the product, but we talked about it. Why isn't it in there? Well, I don't know. We just talked about it. We never formalized anything. We never made tickets about it. We never pushed it to the dev team. Like, you just called me up one afternoon on a Friday, like at 4:30, and said, "Wouldn't it be great if our product did this?" And I agreed with you. Like, it would be really cool if
Yeah.
it did.
My number one memory of that is literally being in a car with my boss in the front seat, me in the back, and like they're going somewhere, and he's in the side seat, and he's like the passenger seat, and I'm in the back, and he's on a call with a client with
Oh no.
someone else, and I just remember him saying something, yeah, it can totally do that thing, and I'm sitting there going, no, it can't. And not only can it not, we've not even had a discussion where you've brought up the fact that this has to be a feature. And he said, yeah, we'll demo it in 2 weeks. And I'm like, so I guess
No.
I've just found out there's a new feature being added in 2 weeks that I'm making that I'm only finding out about by proxy of a phone call you're having in the front seat. But it's like,
That
yeah,
is the
so
worst.
that does happen. Yeah. But you also bring up a very good point with that, though. I think that's another thing that's really worth mentioning. I've up till now I've avoided a lot of like micro details about how to manage some of this, how to like do some of the stuff we talked about,
Mhm.
because realistically there are bugs out there. Like you don't need us to tell you in detail how to like do social anything. Like just you can figure it out. I will say that one of them that you mentioned is very good. Is summarizing the point is one of the most powerful things you can do, because if somebody says I want a thing that does X and Y and Z and whatever, if you say, well, let me just check that I'm understanding you. In other words, say,
Yeah.
I'm repeating it, not to like hold you to it, but just to make sure that I'm getting what you're saying.
Yeah.
You repeat it back to them. That has two things. One, it means you can find those sort of things that are out of odds. And two, it makes them go, oh, they're paying attention. They are actually listening to what I'm saying. They're not just like nodding and writing stuff down. So one of the most powerful things you can do when someone asks you for something is to really do that and just say, okay, let me see. So you're saying you wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and why is that? It's because you're trying to like get that same feel that this other project has, and it's like, yeah. So it's that other one, whatever. And once you kind of again, it's more organic than sort of clinical tips to do it, but that idea of repeating back what people are saying is like one of the most powerful things you can do when trying to figure out requirements for a project.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, all these tips or things that we're saying, they serve the purpose of cultivating a perception about yourself and how much value you're providing. And unfortunately, perception is king. I've found that reality doesn't even matter as long as I mean, the only reality that matters is that you completed it on a deadline. But if you complete something on a deadline and the perception is that it even if you completed it on the deadline, you did everything that was asked of, but in the middle of all that, you cultivate a negative perception about how things are going. Maybe the client is annoyed by the fact that you never communicate with them, or the fact that you
Mm.
don't seem to understand what the requirements are, or you don't. I mean, I've had people under me that I'll get into meetings with them and I'll explain something, a feature, and they'll just sit there with a blank face and say, and at the end of it, say, okay, I'll work on it. And even if they come back and they give me what I asked for, I'm like, but they've given me nothing to like. My
Yeah.
perception is like, I don't know if they really understood, and I don't know if they just got lucky. You know, it's terrible. I've always been someone who's like really hated the idea of like perception. Like, you should just take me for who I am and what I give out, I put out there. But perception is king. And
Mm.
and so you have to constantly cultivate this perception of, hey, I'm actively working for you and I'm trying to provide you value.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and like being uncommunicative is one of the worst things. It's so unsatisfying when you're like, I have this really big thing, it's a big project, and someone's like, yeah, okay, I'll see you next week. It's like, no, I like, are we on the same page? Can you at least tell me that much? Yeah, so I 100% know what you mean. And Don says something about the extras at the end of a project. That's funny. That's literally my next line here.
Nice.
It's literally, I have here, end of project, who owns project / code ? That's literally the next thing I'm going to say. So the idea was, I said, mostly you're only promising a build. So if you're working with a client, most of the time, you're promising them a finished project. Most people don't care about code. They're not trying to do it. They want a thing. They want you to make a thing, and you give them the thing they make. It's like if you're making someone a chair, they don't need the cuttings. They want the chair because it's for a chair to be used as a chair. The difference is, though, it's sometimes a bit of a red flag. If a client is specifically asking for the project, the Unity project, what they're really saying is, we're going to continue this after you're gone. And that's fine. That's something, if that's what they want to do, they can do that. But I only find that happens if they feel like you're not, that they're either going to build it bigger in-house and then make sure that's telegraphed early in advance, or if they feel like they can sneakily keep adding to it without you. And if like they don't need you because, it's so simple, they'll get you to build it up and then they can continue with it. So I find that's not very common. In general, people want the project, not the code. And if they do want the code, it's normally a warning or a red flag to me. That being said, though, sometimes it's okay. I try to avoid going that direction, but if people do want it, I'll happily oblige. Like be flexible about it. Just don't, just be careful. And like I said earlier, assets made for the project are theirs, not yours. Mm-hmm. Any assets at all created, any textures, images, any font licenses and stuff, they're theirs. Now, that being said, again, small asterisk to that, if there is a library of assets, like for example, sometimes I will be working on something and they'll need some sounds, I will buy, not for the project, but I will buy for me the sound library on the asset store. And I will buy it as like I bought it for myself, and I will use it in the project. And I will use it as like because I am now a person making a project. Mm-hmm. The fact that I'm making it for a client is irrelevant. I'm now owning it and I'm doing it. I'll do that because it's better to kind of have the assets myself. Sometimes I'll do that, but for the most part, like I said, if it's bespoke stuff being made, if it's like literally stuff for their project, like I've had stuff where like a client needed a plane made, or they needed textures tidied, or something else. It's like they're not yours. You can't use those in other projects.
Right.
Now again, you can agree to possibly, but like that's a whole separate conversation. And then with the code, like I said, you're not obliged to give them the source code. And I find, like, let's be honest, half the time working on a project, you will make something cool and you'll be like, I can use this in my own stuff. And so to avoid any awkward issues of like you're stealing project code, the fact is, if it's something that fits into kind of library territory, I will expressly move it out and say, this is a system for X. It is under my corporate name. It is a system I have made, and as a gift to myself, you can use it in this project as a consumer. And so that's a line drawn, as this is my command manager system, or my camera swapping system or something. And then there is the client deliverable, which can use that as part of it, and I will make it very clear: this I'm taking away with me. This is mine to use. This is your stuff, and I'm not going to do anything with it unless you come back to me and want changes or stuff added. And sometimes that'll happen. So another thing, if a client asks you for a project and you do it, you deliver it, and you have the source code, do not ever delete that project, because you will sometimes get clients come back to you and say, that project you made for us 3 months ago, we're actually going to now deliver it in China. So we need you to do the same thing and add localization to it. So keep the project and try to make it easy for you to work with going forward. So yeah, source code's yours, but source code for the project theirs, source code for other stuff can be yours if you're honest about it.
Yeah.
Right. We're actually near the end now. Finally, we're actually getting very clear. We're basically at the kind of demo-y stuff now. I don't want to go too far into this. Like, I think there's literally a whole other video on this. So let me just do a quick scan.
Yeah, I think in the next stream, we'll go ahead and dive into the actual code just straight away.
Yeah. I will say, though, so the last few notes, once you've had all the discussions and worked out stuff and contracts are signed and blah, 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 stuff to keep in mind is, one, again, like I said earlier, you want to be careful of clients not wasting your time with all of this, like various meetings and Skypes and whatever, but you also don't want to be out of the loop. So what I highly recommend is, even if they don't offer it, make sure to ask, what do you use? Do you use Slack? Do you have a Miro board, or do you use Milanote, or like what is your thing that you're doing? And oftentimes, like clients won't just come to you with an empty blank slate. They normally have a project with 10 people back and forthing with a backlog of ideas and stuff and whatever. And this whole idea of like trying to figure out what the goal of a project is or what a client is aiming for, sometimes you can just get that information from their own back and forth. Like you will join their chat thing, and you will actually see the discussions they've been having, going, oh, maybe we should try this, and maybe we should pivot that, and let's hire a new voice actor, or let's do this thing. And having that extra information is like going to help you get better at the project. So make a point of getting involved. But if you're anything like me, you'll join it, and then you'll subsequently like mute every channel for everything other than mentions or everywhere, because it can get overwhelming when you've got like 12 different client Slack groups and everyone's like ping. So I'm talking to the investors about, that's nothing to do with me. I'm not like, it's not my thing.
The sales channel.
Yeah, man. Oh. Yeah, that can be a thing. I would also recommend, little pro tip is you want to make your life easy as possible. And for a lot of clients, there is meetups they go to, again, Trello boards, this kind of stuff. Make bookmarks for yourself. Don't have to go hunting again. If there's a meeting, you don't want to have to like, hey, can you resend me that link, or where did I put this thing, or whatever. So what I do is I use a plugin for Chrome called Toby Tabs. And what that lets me do is it replaces my new tab screen with basically strips. And each strip can be a category you name with a bunch of links. So I literally have client one, the meetup channel on Zoom, the Discord, the Google Drive shared docs, the whatever. Next client, same thing. Yeah. And so if there's ever a case of, hey, we've changed the spec for this thing or whatever, I can just go to my tab, find the thing, click the link, open it, and there's it. Even if they could just give it to you, or you could find it on the Slack, it's a lot more professional to not have to say, hey, can you resend me your stuff because I haven't been paying attention to it. It's a much better thing to just be able to have access to those links yourself.
Yeah, it's those little things, and I hate to say it, but they chip away at the positive perception of you. Like, this guy's asking me again for this link. I sent it to him, the other day.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other reason I personally prefer Discord to Slack on things, because unless you're paying for Slack, you don't get the infinite history. But I will often like research back through my Discord chats with people to kind of go, what was that link they sent me, rather than ask them again, because I know it's there and I don't want to waste their time. And if I didn't make a point of saving it, that's my own fault. So yeah, bookmarks. The same thing goes for Google Calendar. There is some stuff that people really just don't do that'll make their life so much easier. One, like make a point of entering meetings in calendars, like allot time to various things. And what you can do is, once it's in your calendar, you can set up notifications. I don't mean just a normal like ping notifications. You can literally have your phone be texted to say, there is a meeting in 10 minutes. And this is just going to make those little moments much easier if you're like, because you will forget, like realistically, if you've got multiple clients and they're at different meetings, there might be we're meeting about this thing to this vendor. It's like, this isn't one of the regular scheduled meetings. This is like they want your input as the technical person on a vendor meeting. You might forget when it's on. And if you're also working in different time zones, that's going to be insane. The amount of times I get a meeting and it says, whatever, 5 p.m., but it's actually 10 a.m. or it's 10 a.m., but it's actually 4 p.m. or whatever. It's like, you're going to freak out. So make a point when you get something through, add it to your calendar and make sure it's in the right time zone. And that way you're not going to be caught off guard by something.
Yeah.
So those two are great. And also emails. Do exactly the same thing with emails. It's so easy. People do not realize this. If you're working with a client, you're getting tons of emails back and forth. Click the few for a particular client, go to the labels, and add a filter that says, this is this client. And then what it'll do is you can say, keep it under that folder. I actually don't use my inbox area. I have a list on the side that is tags, and each one is like, I've got a category called projects, and each project is a client, and it will turn, it'll bold if there's emails from that client. So now I don't have, I stick with the whole inbox zero thing. I delete unnecessary emails, and I try my best to respond almost immediately to every email, because you don't want to be in that position where you have a backlog of stuff that takes time and you're wasting it. So I try to keep my emails constantly like cleared, and it's kind of, you action it almost as soon as it comes in. But at least if you have them in the sidebar, you can decide which stuff is by which client. And again, it helps with the whole history stuff. So set up filters for your emails for stuff you're doing. And this one is just great. This is like one of those amazing things. There is an application called Everything, and it's by a company called Void Tools. And that
Void
is probably,
tools?
yeah, void tools. It's called everything. And it will obviously, like Googling everything is going to have a hard, but it's there. Trust me. This is one of the most powerful things you can have on your entire computer. So if you've ever used the standard Windows search, it is a pain in the ass. You type in anything, you wait for it to spin up. It takes a while, and it indexes your computer and blah blah blah. It takes forever. What everything search does is it indexes everything. It just indexes your computer, and it does that. It does that. I don't know what the exact name for it is, but it's like a removal list, not an addition. So when you open up the tool, it literally shows you every file on your computer. It's a giant list of every single file on your computer, and you have to filter out, not filter in. So the beauty of that is I can literally write enemy space star.cs, and it will find me every file with the word enemy in it. That is a C# file in my entire computer. And so if I remembered for one of the projects, there's a little snippet of code, or there's a particular thing, or I remember, like, it is much faster sometimes if I'm looking for like some database adapter and I don't know which folder it is in the Unity project, I can literally search my entire computer faster by just typing database star C# or CS, and it'll just find it. It's like, there it is. And then I can find it in the project. And this is great for things too, like images and art and whatever. And you can even search contents. I don't normally do it very often, but in general, like, having that as a search tool on your computer is great, especially if you combine it with the advice I gave earlier, which is keep meticulous notes, because it means if you can just write a name of files with like, meetings or names of people or whatever, and you might have this sort of vague memory of, oh, I was working on this project, they're going to meet this John guy, I can't remember the exact thing. So what you do is you search your like projects folder. You can put it in quotes, it'll just only search from there down, so it filters to that folder, and then you can type search contents John, and it'll just find any text file with the word John in it. And you're like, oh, there we go. That's like, you can make your life so much easier for finding and restoring this information. And so yeah, that one is one that, like, it's one of the first things I will ever install on a new computer. Nice. Oh yeah, for storing projects, don't just have a giant folder called projects. You'll get yourself in a big headache doing that. Folder per client. Because realistically, you'll have multiple projects for different clients and different stuff, and you don't want to get into headaches where you're cross-talking, you're forgetting what it's for. And sometimes a client will ask you to do multiple different projects from different environments. So for example, I might have a project for the same client that's like an Android app versus a Unity app versus database web stuff. And rather than having like my Visual Studio projects or Writer project in one place,
right,
my Android project in another, it's kind of the same thing we said before, as you group by feature when grouping in Unity. You do the same thing for your projects. So have a projects folder, have a project per client folder, and then keep your stuff inside of that. And for naming those projects, if they haven't expressly given you a name, just a little tip. So I've mentioned the U dot before. If it's a Unity project, I put a U dot before it, because that very clearly defines to me that it's a folder that stores a Unity project. And oftentimes, like, you can forget that. You have to like open it and check if it's got an assets directory. I hate doing that, because sometimes some are Unity, sometimes some are class libraries. So a nice simple U dot, and also back to search everything, I can now write U dot, and I can find every single Unity project folder in my entire hierarchy of my computer, which is a really powerful thing to be able to do. So that's step one. And two, don't name the project what the client's name is, or don't name the project what the exact project is. Some clients, especially if you've signed an NDA, you don't want to be in a dangerous position of being NDA'd in a project and then the literal name of some director. So you're like scrolling through your Unity projects on a screen share, and it's like, Disney something something something. It's like, no, I shouldn't have done that. So normally a lot of clients will actually give you some sort of code name or whatever. So for example, I've worked on projects called Salamander. Nobody knows what that is, but I do, because it's part of a particular thing, right? So in general,
cool to like have. Ooh, I know. What
admittedly, it does. It does feel kind of cool. So that's just general. U dot some code word, and again, it's under a company folder, so it's usually easy to find anyway. I don't bother like aliasing companies. Realistically, for the most part, if you're working for a company, they're not going to NDA that they're working for them. They might not admit that you worked on it, because oftentimes once you deliver a project, they'll pretend they did it in-house, but like, that's not your problem beyond that point.
Yeah.
Email filters, folders for clients, don't name the project by that. Use source control. I can't believe I still have to tell people this. Use source control.
Even
like,
locally,
I shouldn't,
by the way.
Yeah. And like, I even do this for my notes, as I said earlier. Like you can just people overthink it and think, oh, it's for project management. No, it's just a versioning system.
Yeah.
You could literally just have recipes for things you like in a
Yeah.
folder, or you could just have like notes on stuff. And just I use the shortcut. I think it's Shift right click, and you can say open PowerShell here, and just do git init, git commit -m stuff. Done very quick. Obviously, you can use tools and set up the whole thing and do the whole repository apps and use Git Kraken or the GitHub app or SourceTree. God, I hate SourceTree, but clients love SourceTree for some reason. You can use any one of them. That's fine. But like, just get into the habit of doing the simple stuff yourself with command line. But in general, just use source control. And again, I personally prefer Git, although despite all the memes, I actually do use collab with client projects.
Oh, nice.
Mostly because collab is so easy. If you're working with a client project and they want access to it, all you have to do is give them access to the organization. So it can be very easy. It depends. Obviously, you've got other issues if they have to crosstalk with other ones or whatever. But I find, especially with collaborating with other people, so I work with a couple of people on some projects, and it's so easy. If they make changes, I can open up Unity, and I don't have to like go and do checks. It just changes an icon and go, oh, I need to pull down the latest version. Done. So like, I actually do use collab when it's a kind of under a month long small client project. It's just easier than like actively trying to set stuff up. And also some clients just don't use stuff like GitLab or GitHub, and like you don't have to force them to go down this road. If you can just tell them, open the project, if they do want the source code, open the project in Unity, and they're just press the button, abracadabra, it'll pull it down for you. It's magic. Oh yeah, asset store. Is it okay to use assets? It's fine. Like I know what I said earlier is try to avoid it. It's usually in your best interest not to. I especially, if I'm using any editor tools, I will strip them out of the project before I deliver it. Again, if it's giving the source code, like do not give a client a project which includes Odin Inspector. Just don't do it. But if you need to use something like, if they hire you to do a job, and like I said, I really can't stress this enough, most of the time it's to finish a project. They are hiring you to make a thing that does X. And if you're like, look, I'm not super refreshed on my inverse kinematics, and like I don't want to spend 3 weeks making sure I do the right version of it, just buy the damn asset. And like it's not cheating. Like it's not your homework. Realistically, they want it done. And if you can honestly feel like you will add more value in integrating it and polishing stuff up, they're not going to check your homework. Like that doesn't matter. It just comes down to the difference between if you buy an asset to use to finish a project and deliver a build, all good. If you buy an asset to use it, that then you're giving them the source code and they may need to open it, you'll have to disclose that and just work with. I usually don't even tell people, and it's not like hide anything. I just don't think they care. Right. Like again, if I hired someone to redo the bathroom, and they said, by the way, I actually use this vendor for this and this vendor for this. Like I don't care. Like just do it. Just do the thing. Like
Does the tub work? Does it fill up? Yeah, that's actually a good analogy to use. It's like we hire people in our day-to-day lives to do things for us all the time, and I don't really need to know if I hire a lawn guy to mow the lawn. I don't need to know that he use a particular mower, or he outsourced the weeds to getting rid of the weeds to some other guy who's an expert.
Pretty much, yeah. Like it's just funny. Like I know people feel a bit cagey about doing that. They're like, no, I need to make it myself. And it's like, really? Let's cycle back to one of the very first things I said. You're trying to add value to the client. And if you think your personal pride, no, I'll write the localization system myself. It's like, okay, but now you're debugging it and making sure. And if you're building tooling for that, and if you feel like your tooling is going to be worse than using like L2 or something, just bloody use the asset. That being said, I normally do write my own stuff, at least to start with, and prototype and get it working. But if I'm handing it to a client and it's going to build up or whatever, sometimes I'll pivot to an asset. So like I don't take it off the table. I just don't do it very often. But if I do, I have zero like worry or shame. And I don't even feel like I need to explain myself. I think as far as the client's concerned, if I say like, this is the project, it works, they're not going to say, did you write all this code yourself? Like nobody cares. That's just not a thing. Oh yeah, so some of this stuff is easier to explain visually, but I guess I'll just explain it. The small summary before we do it is, if the client gives you data that you can lock in, they say, we're doing this game and there's 10 enemies, there's 5 islands, there's 15 whatevers. If you know there's a known quantity of data, at least for now, I will every time I will open a text file and I will just write it in a text file. And this isn't for notes anymore. This is now data. This is now an asset that
Uh,
stores stuff. So I will actively say, I'll put it in the Unity project. And they've said to me, we're going to do it. We want 10 colors for these different things. I will just say, cool, folder, here's a file, 10 colors in it. And I don't know how I'm going to use it yet, if at all. But if I ever do need to do something with colors, I can just get the data out of that file and display it on the screen. Or I can like, if they say, oh, we need to instantiate different things and there's going to be like 4 waves and each wave is from a different we're going to have elements of whatever, I'll make a folder, I'll have a file, and I'll write the elements in. This is before the project even starts. I haven't even decided if it's going to be scriptable objects or a database or whatever else, but at least the data is in there. It's now in the project and it's locked in. And if it changes, at least that's a place that'll change in the project, and I will have an asset that now tells me what that is. And there's always ways to generate data back and forth. If you have an asset file, you can always spit it back out or back into other files, and that gives you more freedom. If you have to keep like I've had this before where they've said, oh, we need to do this thing, and each one of these is named, and if you highlight it with the mouse, it'll highlight the different thing. I mean, I don't need a file of them. I'm realistically going to like name the game object that, and when you mouse over, it'll show the name, but I still put them all in a text file so that when I come back, I need to reference it. I don't have to go like hunt for the reference file and find out where stuff is. It's like I made a file that tells me all the names, and if I can automate it, I will. I'll try to iterate through and do something. If I can't automate it, I at least have a referenced file. So write down the things that you know are part of the project, because it starts to, worst case scenario, you can just start printing out the logs of at this time, this event happens. At this time, this event happens. And I do that a lot, where I will do a skeleton of a project where it'll almost go from start to finish, but it will print out what it's doing. Even if it's like not done yet or it's not part of it or whatever, it means that they're in an experience doing stuff and they can like bring up a log and it'll tell them right now this will happen, then this, and then these particles will spawn. And they're like, hang on a second, I kind of changed my mind. Even if they don't see it, they know what the structure is because that's the structure they gave us at the start. And it means if there's ever a time during the project they change their mind, they can't say that like it won't catch you by surprise because they've been seeing it come up every time the last bit of information they gave you on this version of the project.
Yeah.
So just like if there is stuff that is somewhat locked in, write it down, put it in a file, put it in the project. You'll be really grateful to have that later.
I think I'm gonna start doing that. That's pretty smart. Like logging pretty much the entire workflow and saying, "Hey, look, what you're seeing here, but look is what I've done. But look at the logs. You can see where I've got the placeholders for." And that's another like sort of summarizing what the client expects to be able to say, "Look, this is my interpretation of what's going to happen," and they can say, "Oh, wait, actually, I don't know if that makes sense now." And then I see it here in the actual logs in the application.
And that's one of my favorite ones. I worked on this. Normally it isn't as smooth, but there was one project that just went really smooth. It was great. I remember doing this in like the first 2 days, where it was basically events that would happen. And as you go through, it's like you would say, stand on this point, go look at this. Okay, now that you've seen that, have a look at this thing over here. It was a product demo. And I was like, then this happens at this. And then it's like there's a note that says, wait for person to look at this. And then when they look at this, it triggers the next beat of audio. And then it's like, wait X number of seconds. And then it would say, click on this to do this. And then it would like come up, and then it's like wait for a person to click on this. Just the fact that it comes up in the log going waiting for a person to click this, then this, then this. Even if something isn't done or you haven't even finished the highlights yet, they can go, oh, waiting for, okay, cool. So that'll be the part where this happens. That'll be the part where this happens.
Yeah.
And then if you've designed your architecture well enough, which again we'll cover that in an actual code video, you should be able to just swap these out. Because what I do is it's like an event system. It's like it'll dispatch all of these things, and the quick and dirty solution could just be listening to your own messages and then tying those messages to actions. And then once you've plumbed it, you can maybe tidy it up and remove the sort of unnecessary eventing portion of it, because you really shouldn't be relying on events for something you can actually time. But it can be a great way to like get you started. And it also means you can show value in places that you don't see originally. So if you, for example, if you're working on this piece of code and there's nothing visual to show the client, or at least nothing on the current part of the project, you could put it in near the end. So you've like doing something, it'll hook into the right event, even if it's like not part of the flow you're currently doing. That's probably harder to explain what I mean, but we'll show that at some point.
Code. I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up, and then next time, which may be next week, I would say Sunday, we can dive into actually looking at some code. And I think I want to do it next week, just so that we don't let too much time go on. I'm assuming that this whole freelancing discussion series, I guess if you want to call it that, will probably be 3 parts, and
it'll wrap up in the third one, I think.
Yeah. So we don't belabor the point, but so we'll look at some code next time. I noticed a lot of chatter in the chat today. I think we got to most of it. If we didn't, definitely want to head on over to Discord. You'll see that link
Hmm.
somewhere in the chat, and if not, check the description. And also, once we end the stream, this video will process into a VOD that'll be available on the channel. So definitely leave any comments that we didn't get to as questions. Drop them in the comments, and we will definitely respond. Another thing that I'm going to be doing, so keep an eye out for, is cutting these up into clips. So if you see those clips come through in your notifications, uh, just like liking the actual stream itself, it's always very helpful if you see that. If just click on it and give it a like, drop a comment if you can, and that just helps us understand where you guys are at with this sort of content. So yeah, Jason, anything else before we sign off? I mean, damn, this was like, I felt like this was
Yeah,
another like
action packed.
yeah, action packed. It was very meaty content. So definitely, if there's anything you guys wanted to hear more about that we didn't get into, that's another thing to leave comments about. But yeah,
Yeah, and I
there's
think
so
I'm
much to
pretty
say.
much at the end. Yeah, like I'm looking here, and like some of it's just rehashing what we said.
Yeah.
Like a couple of my last notes are things like white box start to finish early. That's basically the same thing as I said. Make sure the client gets a sense of what the end deliverable will look like. Don't let yourself get hounded by emails and stuff. Put your foot down.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't waste your time with things like editor. Oh yeah, don't. The last note here is the only new piece of information. Don't waste your time building complicated editor tools and extensions. There is a fine line between stuff you can do that is going to make it easier or that will be nice for the client versus like building custom inspectors with fancy buttons and stuff like that. That's just going to waste your time. That's again, I'll cover that in more detail when I show you how you can write tooling that isn't a waste of time. But that's literally the last note I have in my giant sheet here is don't waste your time with editor extensions like building your own custom stuff if it's literally not going to add value to the client. So that is all my notes.
Awesome. Yeah. Next time we'll jump into the code and we'll see some examples of what it actually looks like from a practical stance. But I guess to summarize it, you really want to make sure that if you're doing freelancing or contract work, you want to understand what is the value that you're trying to provide to the person who's paying you, the company that you're working for, and work to that. Try to provide that value, and also you're always working to cultivate the perception that your client has of you. So that means always staying on top of taking notes during meetings, grabbing links and keeping them available so you don't have to keep asking for them, and constantly communicating what you're doing so that you don't go down some rabbit hole that's something that your client doesn't even care about or is not providing value to your client. So I guess the last thing I want to do is just want to say thank you to a couple of the other content creators on the platform that showed up today in the stream. I see Roman Papoosh, Matt, Mirafish. Who else did we see here? I saw
Mr. VR himself was here earlier. I don't know
Mr.
if he's still
VR,
here.
Andrew VR. He was
Yeah,
here.
Andrew.
VR with Andrew. Appreciate you guys coming through. Anyone else I missed? Just want to thank you. This is part of like this sort of thing that Jason and I have been trying to do, where we're just trying to pull the community together. So if you're not a content
With our
creator,
powers combined.
yeah, with our powers combined, maybe we'll actually make a game. No, so I just want to thank you guys for coming in, and also anyone else who just joined the stream. Thank you guys for contributing. We really enjoy this. So yeah,
And again, feel free to upvote or comment or anything. Just engage in some way.
If you want to subscribe, who am I to say don't subscribe? If you want to hit that like button, go for it. And I guess without further ado, I think next week I'll be in my new house, so we'll have a little bit of a different setup.
Nice.
Looking forward to that. And then I think, knock on wood, I'll get back to my regularly scheduled videos on Sundays, and then we'll probably move these streams to like Thursdays. Was the day we were using before, so
cool.
Keep an eye out for that. All right, guys. Well, cheers. Have a good Saturday and the rest of your weekend, and catch you later.
Good luck.
All right, guys. Bye, guys.